Good morning, everyone. Happy Thursday. We made it to meeting day. Welcome to the first annual Pediatric Mental Health Care Access Program, also known as PMHCA. You might hear that acronym today. We're having our All-Awardee meeting today and tomorrow, so thank you for joining us. My name is Madhavi Reddy. I'm one of 3 project officers for the program. So if you'll bear with me for a minute, I want to start with several thank yous. I want to thank my teammates, Kelly Dawson and Kara Dela Cruz, for leading the planning and coordination efforts for this meeting. I can honestly say that we wouldn't be having this meeting without their hard work over the last 6 months. I also must thank Alterum for their meeting logistics support, as it became apparent that we would have to transition the in-person meeting to a virtual meeting because of the COVID-19 crisis. We worked with Alterum to stand up the meeting pretty seamlessly. We all have our fingers crossed that Adobe Connect is ready and eager to cooperate with us over the next 2 days. Finally, I also want to make one more big thank you. I want to thank the amazing group of PMHCA awardees that came together in November to help us with meeting topics and speakers. I'm going to name them. They are Susan Griffin, Mary Lutke, Tom Schultz, I hope I pronounced your last name correctly, Tom, Coffee Dixon, and Bethany Geldmaker. I want to give everyone that I've mentioned a round of applause because you deserve it, and I also want to give the participants of the meeting a round of applause as well. We know that this is a challenging time for all of you, but we really hope that you're taking care of yourselves, your families, and please give our best to the populations and communities that you serve. I just want to do a quick run through of day 1. We'll be together for the next 4.5 hours, so just want to make sure that everyone knows that they will be muted in listen-only mode. But if you've dialed into a phone line or have enabled audio through your computer, please make sure you are on mute. Also, if you want to type in questions or ask questions, please use the chat pod to type in your questions during today's sessions. Today's sessions will be closed captioned for the hearing impaired. The agenda and speaker bios are available in the download area pod or the download pod. So you should be able to click on agenda and speaker in the download pod, highlight it, and then click on download file to download the agenda and speaker bios. You can also expand your view of the presenter slides by pressing the full screen button in the top right corner of the slide presentation. But if you have any technical issues, please contact Alterum at webmeeting@alterum.org. Most sessions will have a Q&A session following the presentations, but for our opening session with Dr. Michael Warren and Ms. Lauren Raskin Ramos, we may not have time for Q&A at the end, but we will collect your questions and ask Dr. Warren and Lauren to respond after the meeting. After our opening session today, we will hear from Dr. John Strauss and Dr. Robert Hilt about what success looks like in child psychiatry access programs. Then we'll have a 45-minute lunch break. We'll try to start the afternoon session promptly at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. After lunch, we'll hear from the JBS International on data collection and evaluation, and conclude day 1 with presentations on the HRSA Telehealth Resource Centers. With that, you can see that the agenda for day 1 is pretty jam-packed, and it's going to be a stellar day 1. So we're all looking forward to it. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Michael Warren, Associate Administrator for the Maternal and Child Health Bureau, who will provide a welcome and opening remarks to the audience. Dr. Warren is, as I mentioned, the Associate Administrator for the Maternal and Child Health Bureau. He became the Associate Administrator for the Bureau on October 15, 2018. MCHB's mission is to improve the health of America's mothers, children, and families. Its Title V Maternal and Child Health Block Grant Program provides health care and public health services for an estimated 56 million people, including pregnant women, infants, children, including children with special health care needs and their families. Dr. Warren manages MCHB's $1.33 billion budget, providing vision and direction to ensure programs are planned and carried out effectively to achieve results. Dr. Warren's impressive career in public health clearly demonstrated his passion and commitment to improving maternal and child health outcomes. Before assuming his current role as MCHB's Associate Administrator, Dr. Warren served as the Deputy Commissioner for Population Health at the Tennessee Department of Health, where he made improvements in maternal and child health across the state. As a board-certified pediatrician, Dr. Warren previously served as the Tennessee Department of Health Assistant Commissioner for Family Health and Wellness and as the Director of Maternal and Child Health. He has served as the President for the Association of Maternal and Child Health Programs, also known as AMCHIP, the National Professional Organization for Maternal and Child Health Professionals. So with that, I'm going to turn the session over to Dr. Warren. Thank you.
Thank you, Madhavi, and good morning, everyone. I am so pleased to be joining you all today, and I want to start off by thanking all of you for committing this time, particularly during these extraordinary times and extraordinarily challenging times for the children and families that you are serving. It is no small feat to commit to coming together like this, even under the best of circumstances. And so to me, the fact that you commit to do this in times like these really underscores your commitment to the MCH population. And so from the Bureau, please know that you have our sincerest thanks. And I know we're all excited to be able to be together and learn from you over the next couple of days. I do want to thank the team that is responsible for this meeting. As you heard, a number of folks from among you work to recommend ideas and speakers and approaches for this meeting, and so thanks to all those folks that were mentioned. Thanks to our project team, Madhavi and Kara and Kelly, as well as our partners at Alterum for their work in pulling this together. I think that despite the challenges, it's in times of emergency and crisis like these that we recognize that your programs, the Pediatric Mental Health Care Access Programs, are poised so perfectly to provide much needed behavioral health related services to address potentially an increased need and demand for services. And so as we move into this response, all that work you've done to build and expand your infrastructure, you're now able to leverage that and be able to apply those efforts to support healthcare providers in your states, particularly those that are experiencing an increase in the demand for behavioral health services. When we think back over what you have done to date, it is so impressive how you are pushing the field to promote early support for behavioral health issues. Just a few examples or common themes. You're really working upstream to prevent and mitigate the effects that inadequately addressed behavioral disorders can have across the life course. You're working collaboratively across sectors and disciplines to not only develop, but to implement and evaluate teleconsultation, training, care coordination efforts, and also to examine policies, systems, and environmental strategies that support optimal behavioral health in children, adolescents, and young adults. And we know early on, 88% of states from our 2018 cohort have already rolled out their teleconsultation and web-based training programs, and over 90% of you are implementing activities in rural and other underserved areas. The great majority of you are also positioning your programs for long-term sustainability. You're developing sustainability plans and identifying ways to enhance sustainability through reimbursement, through leveraging non-federal funds, and through actively engaging with stakeholders and advisory council members. And I think finally, I've been so touched to read some of the quotes that you've shared from healthcare providers who are participating in your programs. We've heard from providers that they're better able to provide referral options. They use what they've learned in training to manage some cases themselves, and they're identifying behavioral health concerns that they may not previously have recognized, and in doing so, they're more confident in providing their services. So your work is truly making a difference, and we at the Bureau are so grateful for those efforts. As a pediatrician and a public health professional, I have seen firsthand the impact of behavioral health on overall health and well-being. And I've been that frontline provider who didn't feel like I had all the skills that I needed to provide either consultation or management of those particularly more serious behavioral health conditions. And so what you're doing is such an important service to the pediatric provider community. From the public health side, I've also seen the systems level challenges with making sure that we have timely access to behavioral health expertise, particularly in rural and other medically underserved areas. Your programs are filling critical gaps across the nation and really are helping us to achieve our MCHB mission of improving the health and well-being of America's mothers, children, and families. At MCHB, we're using a framework called Accelerate Upstream Together to talk about how we move forward to accomplish that mission that I just mentioned. And so I want to spend a little bit of time talking about those three words, accelerate, upstream, together. When we talk about accelerate, what we really mean is we have to accelerate the pace of change in key population outcomes. If you look back over the course of the Bureau's work, we've made improvements in some areas like infant mortality, but we can't be complacent with the pace of change. And even in those areas where we've made improvement, we still have much more work to be done. And I think particularly when you start to peel back the layers on individual outcomes and look at things like stratifiers of race and ethnicity and rurality, we know there are marked disparities, and we have to accelerate the pace of change so that all children and families in this country can have those improved outcomes. The upstream part of this really talks about a change in our approach. We are pretty good in this country at taking care of sick people, but really our goal should be to think upstream about how we keep them healthy and prevent them from ever becoming ill in the first place. And how do we do that? Well, when we think about what determines overall health and well-being, we know that health care only accounts for about 10 to 20% of overall health and well-being. Other factors like health behaviors, community, and environment play a larger role. So we have to think about those factors that influence health and continue to address those. Also, when we're talking about upstream, in MCH, we talk about the life course model. We know that early experiences impact a person's health trajectory over the course of their lifespan. And so in this way of thinking upstream, we think about those early experiences and the impact on later health, or even the impact of a parent's health and well-being on the health of their offspring. And so your programs are most certainly addressing this, thinking about how we address challenges early on so that we try to minimize risk factors or mitigate them and ultimately improve an individual's health trajectory. And then the last part of Accelerate Upstream Together is together. We can't do this work alone. We at MCHB work closely with partners within HRSA, within other parts of the federal government, with state and local partners, and all those folks on the ground like you who are working to support MCH and pediatric behavioral health. So lots of pieces of your program really align with this framework of Accelerate Upstream Together, and you're a crucial part in helping us to accomplish our mission. I want to talk a little bit about the together piece that I mentioned at the end. As we all move forward, I want you to continue to think about leveraging partnerships to advance behavioral health. You're already making connections across your states and seeking out opportunities where you can lend your voice to develop innovative solutions to current and emerging behavioral health issues of today and tomorrow. In just a short period of time since your grants have started, you've developed national, statewide, and regional partnerships across a broad range of organizations that are increasing access through telehealth to behavioral health treatment, referral, and care coordination for children and adolescents and their families. I do want to take a few moments to highlight some opportunities to collaborate with other HRSA and MCHB efforts related to behavioral health. So the first of those would be our Title V Block Grant program. The Block Grant is our Bureau's largest investment and is the oldest federal-state partnership in federal government. Title V programs develop strategies to address pediatric behavioral health needs in states, territories, jurisdictions, and communities. One Title V goal of particular importance to you all should be that Title V works to increase health assessments and follow-up diagnostic and treatment services, especially for vulnerable and underserved children and adolescents. The good news is already over half of your programs are housed within state Title V agencies. For those of you that are not, I strongly encourage you to think about establishing and maintaining robust and collaborative partnerships with your Title V programs. These programs have the leadership and organizational capacity to act as pediatric mental health care access champions, to guide process and policy development, and to help you leverage key partnerships and funding opportunities. I also want to mention HRSA's Health Center program. Health centers provide care to more than 28 million of the nation's most vulnerable individuals and families. There are opportunities for you to partner with health centers in integrating behavioral health into primary care services and to provide teleconsultation and referral for specialty care. And then finally, a resource I want to share with you is HRSA's Telehealth Resource Centers. These centers provide technical assistance, education, and information to organizations and individuals who are actively providing healthcare at a distance. Later today, you'll get an overview about the Telehealth Resource Centers and learn how they can help you navigate challenges your programs may be facing now and in the future. We at the Bureau are so grateful for your work thus far, and we certainly look forward to what you will be able to accomplish during the remainder of your grant period. Given the prominent contributions of behavioral health to many MCH outcomes, your efforts are helping us to accelerate the pace of improving health for MCH populations. Thank you for being here. Thank you for allowing me to talk briefly with you this morning, and we look forward to our ongoing partnership with you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Warren. I think that we were going to see if there were any questions that came in through the chat pod that we could ask you since we have a few extra minutes. So just wanted to give folks an opportunity to type in to submit your questions in the chat pod if you have any questions. So I know that there was a message that was sent out, but it's in a little tiny chat pod or Q&A pod, so folks may have not seen the message. But if you do have any questions for Dr. Warren, please feel free to submit them now, and you know, we'll definitely ask Dr. Warren to respond. So, so Dr. Warren, do you mind if we just wait a second just to see if we get any questions for you?
No problem at all.
Okay. Okay, let's see. So it looks like I don't see anyone typing. So I'm just going to hold on the questions. I think we might have time at the end. So if folks are thinking of questions that they want to ask, please type them in. And I think if that's okay, Dr. Warren, we'll move to Lauren, and then we'll see if we have any questions at the end of her presentation. So thank you so much, Dr. Warren. So now I'd like to welcome Ms. Lauren Raskin Ramos, the Director for the Division of Maternal and Child Health Workforce Development. She will provide an overview of the division, where PMHCA sits within the division, and offer some highlights from the program after its inception in 2018. So I will read Lauren's bio. Lauren Raskin Ramos is the Director of the Division of Maternal and Child Health Workforce Development at the Health Resources and Services Administration's Maternal and Child Health Bureau. In her role, Lauren leads federal efforts to educate and train the current and future maternal and child health workforce. Lauren is also the lead for the MCHB's Autism Investments. Previously, Lauren held leadership roles at the Association of Maternal and Child Health Programs and the Association of State and Territorial Health Officials. Lauren has also worked at the National Center for Education in Maternal and Child Health at Georgetown University on the Bright Futures Project and the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists. Lauren served as an officer of the Maternal and Child Health section of the American Public Health Association and as a board member of the National Healthy Mothers, Healthy Babies Coalition. Lauren completed her MPH at the UCLA School of Public Health with a concentration in community health sciences, and received her BA in sociology and a certificate in community health from Tufts University. Lauren was the 2011 APHA MCH Section's Young Professional Awardee. So with that, I'm going to turn the session over to Lauren. Thanks, Lauren.
Thank you, Madhavi, for that long introduction. Appreciate it. Good morning, everyone. It's so wonderful to be with all of you. We had so hoped to see you in person, but I'm thrilled to see so many of you online, and really echo my thanks for you taking the time to be together over the course of today and tomorrow to learn from one another, to share your best practices and continue to strengthen the programs together. I also want to thank our amazing project officer staff, Madhavi, Kara, and Kelly. You all interact so closely with them, and I'm sure you feel their passion for your programs, and we hear about all the wonderful work that you're doing all the time. So thank you for supporting that collaborative relationship with them and with us. My goal today is just to loop you into some of the larger Health and Human Services and HRSA priority areas, connect you more closely to some of the activities of the Division of MCH Workforce Development, talk a little bit about some opportunities and alignment should you want to be more involved in some of our activities, and then we'll celebrate some of your accomplishments, which is always a wonderful thing to do. So I'm going to start at a pretty high level and just make sure you're aware of some of the ongoing focus areas of Department of Health and Human Services, or HHS, and HRSA. You'll see as you look at this slide how they all really touch the work that you do. And so just wanted to call them out in a little bit more detail so that you know the work that you're doing really is so well connected to priority areas both of HRSA and the larger department. Ongoing work first in behavioral and mental health, so clearly well aligned to the work that you're doing, has been a priority of HHS over the past few years as we've seen more growth in the work around connecting primary care to behavioral health, really thinking about how do we leverage our existing programs and connect them to better meet the health needs of families with behavioral and mental health issues. A second key focus area of the administration and HHS has been reducing opioid and substance use and misuse. So again, another close connection to the work that you're doing. And within HRSA, we've seen a great focus in particular in thinking about how do we leverage community health centers and rural health centers with opioid and substance use and misuse services. HRSA has a federal office on rural health policy. I know you'll interact later today with the telehealth resource centers, which sit in our rural health office, and really extending care to rural health and other vulnerable populations has been a significant priority for this administration. And again, your work is so well aligned to supporting our priority in really expanding access to rural health care. Lastly, maternal health has been a growing area of focus for the administration as we look in particular in how do we reduce maternal mortality and serious morbidity. And then lastly, a newer priority for the President and the administration has been ending the HIV/AIDS epidemic, really reducing new infections. So just wanted to loop you into some of those higher priorities. I'm sure you follow them along in the media, but sometimes it's nice to see how they trickle down and touch our programs. I'm going to move to a much more granular level now and really talk a little bit more about the Division of MCH Workforce Development. When you first received your grants from us, we gave you an orientation to our division and programs. So at the time, I think it's so overwhelming and you're so excited to just get going in your own grant that it takes some time to see how you fit into our larger division. And so I wanted to review some of that with you today and hope at the end of our presentation that I've identified some connections that you're inspired to make going forward. So our division, as kind of our broad mission, is to develop the current and future generations of maternal and child health leaders through three key areas: pipeline and graduate education, workforce development for practicing maternal and child health professionals, and community-based programs. And when we operationalize that, we turn that into 15 different grant programs. So a little bit of a busy slide, but I wanted to share with you the continuum of our workforce development programs to see where you fit in, but also to point out some of the connections that we want to make sure that we're helping you connect to. So as we think about our programs, we really think about it as this continuum, starting with exposure to MCH and public health through an undergraduate pipeline program. Significant part of our investments are interdisciplinary graduate training programs, of which we have several listed on this slide. The ones that I wanted to call your attention to are the Developmental Behavioral Pediatrics Program and the Leadership Education in Neurodevelopmental and Related Disabilities, or LEND program in particular, as those are programs that are training psychologists and others who can identify, diagnose, and intervene for developmental and other behavioral health issues. And so that's part of the pipeline of people that you would want to be working with going forward, but also wanted to let you know that those programs are providing continuing education to the field and have faculty and national leaders leading those programs that can be resources to you, and perhaps even DBPs that can be part of your call lines. So we have a map on our website of where all of our programs are and abstracts. I'll make sure that we follow up after today's presentation so that we can connect you to those programs that are either in your state or your region, because there can be significant partnerships on a variety of activities, and I think you can be significant partners to them in helping them advance their agendas as well. So that's our commitment after today, to connect you. Later this afternoon, I'm actually talking with the Developmental Behavioral Pediatrics Program. They're meeting as their grantee group later today, and we'll give them the same pitch. They have been very interested in learning more about PMHCA, and so it's a great opportunity as you're up and running now and recognize what some of your needs are to facilitate some of those connections. And so as we move across the slide, you'll see that you fit in the practicing MCH professional. So of course you're also building state and community-based programs. We should really put you in both places, but really appreciate the work that you're doing to train the MCH workforce along with other of our public health investments and really helping to build state and community-based programs. I wanted to share a few opportunities of things that are happening across MCHB and things that we hope we'll be able to connect you with as you're interested going forward. MCHB first is starting a strategic planning process where we're developing a new strategic plan, and there will be significant opportunities for our grantees and stakeholders to be involved in the coming months. This is a great opportunity for you to make sure we're well aware of the needs of children and adolescents with behavioral and mental health issues and how we can best think about MCHB's role in supporting you in those issues. So stay tuned to hear more from your project officers about ways to be involved in the MCHB strategic plan as we're developing it in the coming months. A second important anniversary or event for us is the 85th anniversary of Title V. So we know that at least half of you are already in Title V programs, and I'm hopeful that the rest of you are actively partnering with Title V. As you know, Title V is a significant part of the Bureau's investment and our history, and as part of our strategic planning process, we will celebrate Title V in the fall and also look to what does it look like to celebrate and think about the role of Title V at 100 years. We had been planning an in-person event for that. Things are a little bit in flux right now, but we'll keep you in the loop about that anniversary celebration and ways that you might be able to engage. As you're, I'm sure, well aware, the state Title V programs have just completed their needs assessment. It's my hope that you've been involved in the state needs assessment process. That's a plan for each state Title V agency to look at the significant needs across maternal and child health programs and submit that as part of their annual application for funding to MCHB. It's the first step in states creating a 5-year state action plan in which they'll be responding to the critical needs identified in the Title V needs assessment. So even if you had not been involved in the state Title V needs assessment, there's a great opportunity to connect with your Title V program to learn more about their plans for addressing the behavioral health needs and mental health needs of children and families, and identify areas and opportunities for partnership. The next area I wanted to point out is adverse childhood experiences. MCHB is looking internally at our work and strategic direction around adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, and that's obviously a significant part of the work that you are also doing, and so we'll continue to think about opportunities to leverage your work as we move forward with that body of work. A significant area across all of our division programs is thinking about innovation and training. And so we have always been thinking about what are the new and creative ways that we can extend the reach of our training programs and continuing education. And the experience I think that we're going through right now with COVID-19, as all of our programs are really forced to think about training in different ways, really will identify new ways of providing training and supporting not just students, but also providers. And so over the coming months, as you're continuing to train and reach providers, I think there'll be a number of impressive innovations that we'll gather from you and be able to spread across programs as well. So please, I encourage you to continue to share the things that you're doing with your project officers. I've already mentioned better connecting you with some of our behavioral and mental health programs. I talked about the Developmental Behavioral Pediatrics program and our LEND program. We also support a very small collaborative office rounds program, which we have 10 grants across the country that's doing really grand rounds type of education for primary care providers around behavioral and mental health issues. And so another opportunity to connect on CE and training. And again, we'll follow up on that. And then lastly, you're so involved in gathering your data and helping us understand your impact and your story, and we want to continue to partner with you to think about how do we tell the story of PMHCA and the reach that you are already impressively reaching to support MCH populations. And so you're actively involved in our evaluation, and we'll continue to gather those stories and think together about how do we best spread those messages. So I'm going to turn now and talk a little bit about your accomplishments, which have been so impressive, and we talk about them, as I said, internally all the time. It's really wonderful to see how quickly you've ramped up and expanded your programs, and so we're so proud of your efforts to date, as you've heard from Dr. Warren, and you'll hear more, I think, throughout the next day and a half as we celebrate your accomplishments, but wanted you to just take a few minutes to look at the data with us. And I hope you'll revel in your accomplishments as well, because we know you've overcome a lot of challenges, both in startup and barriers, and you've really navigated them so well. So let's talk a little bit about some of your progress to date. The data on the next few slides is based on your non-competing continuation progress report for our first cohort, so of the first set of 18 states that were funded. And so I want to talk a little bit about some of the reach and the progress that you've made to date. So collectively, at the point in time of submitting your progress report, 88% of your programs had already rolled out teleconsultation and web-based training. Over 90% of the projects were implementing activities to increase behavioral health services for primary care providers in rural and underserved areas. And so that's a range of those of you who were starting new programs or expanding into new areas. And as I said, you've overcome these challenges of what technology do we use, getting people involved, and even getting people to start using your call lines. And so you really moved so quickly to make a quick impact and reach within your states. Over 94% of you were developing sustainability plans. And so we know that's so important as you're continuing to build in your partnerships, build your advisory committees, partner with Medicaid, insurers, and others to build in both reimbursement, but also the buy-in of the stakeholders to help you sustain the program beyond the life of this funding and really help to spread it. And we've seen so many effective practices. Some of you have been able to leverage other funding sources and bridge new partnerships with Medicaid and others. And so it's been so nice to see the innovation in your partnerships, reaching out to some new partners such as schools of public health, and strengthening other partnerships and collaboration with family and self-advocate organizations, community health centers, state chapters of the AAP and other medical associations and others. So we're learning about some of your partnerships and hoping to model them at our level, but really excited about the work that you've been doing to really think about sustainability, meeting the required match within the program, and engage a wide variety of stakeholders across your states. I wanted to share back with you a little more of your data And this really gets at the heart of what you're doing as we look to the numbers of children, adolescents, and providers that you're reaching. So collectively, 746 children are participating in PMHCA programs. 386 children received at least one screening for a behavioral health condition. You've enrolled over 1,700 providers, and over 400 providers received teleconsultation, and through your continuing education efforts, you've reached over 2,000 participants, and that's in a really short time. And we know the teleconsultation has grown significantly since you've reported that data, and so the numbers really are continuing to grow. So we wanted to share your data back with you, but really also thank you for how many children and providers you're already touching. We've been delighted to get on the road and visit some of you through site visits. In the past year, our staff have visited with Virginia, Delaware, Montana, and Alaska. These are some beautiful pictures from the site visit to Montana. So we appreciate kind of your hospitality in showing us beautiful parts of your states, but also helping us better understand your programs, your technical assistance needs, and your challenges, and really showing us what does it look like to provide a PMHCA program within your state. Once we're able to travel again, we'll be coming to see some more of you, and so look forward to partnering on those technical assistance site visits. Within the site visits, the types of things that we have learned are about your challenges with reimbursement, sometimes working with Medicaid or insurers, challenges reaching new providers, particular challenges with contracts, hiring staff. And so then we use the site visit time to brainstorm and really think about what are the technical assistance and strategies to help you support the growth of your program and navigate some of those challenges. And so we learn probably more from you in those site visits than maybe we're providing, but we hope those are a good collaborative TA visit. And again, look forward to visiting with you more once we're all able to travel again. I wanted to close with some of the feedback that we've pulled from your non-competing continuations, which really gets to the heart of the impact that you're making. So I won't read all of these quotes, let you take a moment to review them, but some of the things that really jump out at me is what a difference you're making in supporting the competence and the confidence of primary care providers through the consultation, providing timely response, assuring them that they can do this. And you can see from some of the quotes on the slide that providers are now catching kids that might have slipped through the cracks. We're confident that they can treat that child within their practice rather than make a referral. And so those are, I think, heartwarming to us, and I hope you have the same pride in reviewing some of this feedback as we feel as well. And so I'll close with one other long quote that we've pulled from one of your progress reports about why PMHCA is important. And so I'll give you a second to read that, but again, really gets to the difference that all of you are making in supporting primary care providers to be able to address behavioral and mental health issues within their practices, and then making a difference really in the life course and the trajectory of a particular child and family. Leave that up for a second. But again, that I believe it saves lives, and we think the work that you're doing really is so impactful. So thank you so much for allowing me to speak with you today. Dr. Warren and I are happy to take any questions that you have now, or we're available to you later. And again, look forward to participating throughout the meeting and learning more from all of you today and tomorrow. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Lauren. Great presentation. Thanks to Dr. Warren as well for both of you for setting the stage for our meeting today. A lot to think about. Also, thank you for sharing resources and materials that we'll be sending to the awardees after the meeting so that they can connect with some of the programs that LEN, DBP, other HRSA programs that they might be able, that the awardees might be able to connect with after the meeting. Appreciate you sharing those ideas. Also, for the awardees, if you have already connected with LEND and DBP and core programs in your states or in your regions, and you would like to share any examples of how that collaboration is going, how it's ongoing, how robust it is, or anything like that. Any types of thoughts or ideas or just observations that you have about your partnerships that are already in place. Feel free to enter those comments into the Q&A chat pod, and we'll be collecting those responses and during the course of the meeting. So I'm just checking to see if there's any questions. I don't see any, so I think we're going to move on to the next session. Before we do that, before I turn things over to my colleague, Kelly Dawson, to make introductions for our next session, I just wanted to say thank you also to the Screening and Treatment for Maternal Depression and Related Behavioral Disorders programs for joining us today and tomorrow. I think some of the awardees for the program have joined us for the meeting, so I thank you for joining us. And actually, the program is a sister program of the Pediatric Mental Health Care Access Program under the 21st Century Cures Act program legislative authority. So we're happy to have those awardees with us attending the meeting today and tomorrow. And also just a thank you to the project officer for the program, Ashley Belton, for joining us today as well. So now I'm going to turn the meeting over to Kelly Dawson, who's going to introduce our next set of speakers for the What Success Looks Like in Child Psychiatry Access Programs. Our speakers are Dr. John Strauss and Dr. Robert Hilt. So now I'm going to turn it over to Kelly. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks so much, Madhavi. Before we move forward, I think Dr. Warren maybe wanted to make one last quick comment. Dr. Warren?
Sure, thank you. I just was struck by the quote that Lauren shared, and I hope all of you will take a moment to really appreciate the sentiment that is shared there. I think so many of us have been in those moments with families who are stressed and maybe in a moment of crisis, and you know that even a few hours or a day or a few days to get to either definitive resources or treatment can seem like an eternity. And so what I heard in that quote was really relief, not only for the provider, but also for the family. And I think in my mind, that's what makes us all get excited about coming to work every day, is that support that we're able to provide families, that hope that we're able to give them, and through your services, being able to better equip primary care providers to either be able to deal with this in the moment or to know that they can pick up the phone or access you really quickly in other ways. And so suddenly want to thank you.
Thanks so much, Dr. Warren. So my name is Kelly Dawson. I am one of the 3 project officers, and we're so happy so many of you were able to join us virtually. So for our next session, we're excited to invite 2 leaders in the field whom many of you are pretty familiar with. We'll start with a presentation from Dr. John Strauss, followed by a presentation from Dr. Robert Hilt. Dr. Strauss is a primary care pediatrician and the founding director of the Massachusetts Child Psychiatry Access Program, known as MCPAP. Established in 2014, the MCPAP was the first statewide program designed to address the shortage of children's psychiatrists. Dr. Strauss was responsible for the expansion of MCPAP to MCPAP for moms to address perinatal depression, mental illness, and substance abuse. MCPAP is the model for the implementation of access programs in 37 other states and for the federal legislation in the 21st Century Cures Act, which led to the 21 state pediatric HRSA grants and 7 state maternal HRSA grants. He is president of the National Network of Child Psychiatry Access Programs, a nonprofit dedicated to providing technical assistance and support to child psychiatry access programs. And beginning in 2019, Dr. Strauss designed the Massachusetts Consultation Service for Treatment of Addiction and Pain, or MCSTAP, to assist adult primary care providers with substance use disorder and chronic pain issues. Dr. Strauss had a primary care practice for 22 years and 30 years in managed care administration. He completed his medical training at Columbia University, pediatric training at Strong Memorial Hospital at the University of Rochester, and was a Robert Wood Johnson Clinical Scholar at Johns Hopkins Medical School. As I mentioned, following Dr. Strauss's presentation, we'll then hear from Dr. Robert Hilt about his experience working with multiple CPAP programs. And I'll just read Dr. Hilt's bio before we get started. Dr. Hilt is a professor at the professor of psychiatry at the University of Washington and Seattle Children's Hospital. Prior to his career as a child psychiatrist, Dr. Hilt worked as a primary care pediatrician and then as a pediatric hospitalist. Dr. Hilt is the program director for the Partnership Access Line, a child mental health consultation service for primary care providers in Wyoming, Washington, and Alaska. He is also the program director for the Medicaid Medications Second Opinion programs of both Wyoming and Washington, and MDT Consult services in Wyoming. He has served as a mental health editor for the American Academy of Pediatrics PrEP Self-Assessment and served on the editorial board for Pediatric Annals, Psychiatric Annals, and Psychiatric Services. Please enter your questions for Dr. Strauss and Dr. Hilt into the Q&A pod, and your questions will be addressed at the end of their presentation. With that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Strauss.
Can I be unmuted, please?
We can hear you, Dr. Strauss.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay, thank you. Oh, thank you for that nice introduction, Kelly. Thanks to Dr. Warren and Lauren for their words. And before I start, just a few introductory thoughts. It's really amazing. I can't express enough my excitement at being able to address a meeting with folks from 21 states doing psychiatry consultation work. It's really amazing. And especially knowing how hard it is to get programs up and running, to see those quotes that Lauren had, really just so rewarding. And I'm sure you, as we have in Massachusetts, have found how rewarding it is to be able to help providers out in the field. I also have met many of you through phone or email, but I was really hoping to meet you in person, and hopefully we'll be able to do that next year. I also just want to generally, as did Lauren, thank you for all you're doing for the children across the country. It's really just so nice to see what you can be doing. And finally, just to thank HRSA for getting this program up and running so efficiently and effectively. They didn't have much time, and you guys have done a wonderful, seem like done a wonderful job. So my task is to spend a few minutes talking about what success can look like in a program that's started back in 2004. And my goals for today are to briefly review some of what MCPAP structurally is, but I think most of you know that, so I'm spend very little time on that. But spend most of my time measuring success currently, and a little bit about thinking about how we're going to be, where we go from here. So as most of you know, the program elements for MCPAP are starting with enrollment. Just remember that it took us 3 and then once they're enrolled, it's an ongoing process of keeping practice engaged. And that doesn't stop even after in our 16th year. Our basic service is phone consultation with our 30-minute expectation for a return call. And we do able to keep that in over 90% of our calls. We provide face-to-face or video consultations to families and do that in about 20% of those calls. We're currently doing that in about 20% of the calls that are coming into us. And then we provide resources for community services. And then finally, education, and we do that in multiple ways through webinars, website, newsletters, any way we can help providers learn, reaching out to their practices. And you can go to our website, www.pcap.org, to find out more about that. So I could spend a long time talking about the program, but I'm not going to do that because that's not my goal today. I have to start with, this wouldn't have been true 2 months ago, but I have to start with COVID-19 because I think, as many of you I'm sure have found, it really changed things very quickly. And we were very pleased to find that we could adjust overnight. We had no break in program functioning. We had several years ago switched to a cloud internet-based phone system called 8x8, which really allowed us to immediately switch to having people use the phone system wherever they were remotely. And getting into, as our program, as many of you use your institutional systems for doing face-to-face or televideo consultations, and we had been, over the last few years, trying to get some of those institutions to use televideo more, and we were struggling with that. And lo and behold, overnight, in 1 week, all 7 sites were up using televideo. And but one thing we did find is that the families are having more problems than the docs are doing fine. But families are having more difficulty, and I think this will be a learning process. Hopefully we'll get better. But in our more rural areas, they may not have broadband access, even cell phone access. And privacy issues, trying to find a place to do that. Sometimes people are calling us from their cars. And you know, initially everyone thought they would be going into their provider's office and calling and connecting with us there where there was more connectivity. But obviously that can't happen right now. We'll see what happens when the crisis is over. But and some families just aren't as comfortable with that first getting to know you over video. There's something about you being used to going into a provider's office. So I think those will be interesting things to see how that works out over time. We were able to provide immediate communication to providers, and we used using our constant contact mailing list, and we had a webinar and a newsletter that came up very quickly. And then we've been reaching out to providers, and we're finding that we thought we might initially be bothering them, but they've been very happy for us to call out and see how they're doing and what they need. Okay, our next measure of success is the practice engagement, and you see the map of the state and where all the practices are, and we've enrolled over 95% of our practices in the state. And we've actually used our all-payer claim database to look at whether that's actually, because as you know, true, because as you know, it's hard to identify all practices. And when we look at claims and look where kids are getting their primary care, we have enrolled over 95% of the practices through claims, and probably closer to 98%. We look at their annual use to make sure they're continuing to be engaged, and we run around over 80% for our 451 enrolled practices, and over 60% for our pediatricians. And this really reminds me to remind all of you that we like to think of these programs as population-based and not just preaching to the choir. We want to make sure we're reaching all the kids. There are 1.5 million kids in the state of Massachusetts, and if you figure that, well, actually, I'm going to get that to the next slide. All right? Because the next slide is success around utilization. And we do serve around 6,000 youth a year, and out of the 1.5 million. And just to put that in a little bit of perspective, if you figure there are 1.5 million kids in the state, about 20% of them supposedly have a behavioral health need, which would be about 300,000. We're actually reaching 2.5% of the kids with behavioral health needs, and that's pretty good. And that's every year. And so over the youth's childhood, we should be able to help those that really do need it. We annually have about 7,500 phone consults. We have family or patient consults with 2,100 kids, and we help find resources for about 3,400. So pretty robust, and but that, you know, that's it needs to keep on engaging those practices to keep that up. You know the old adage of giving a man a fish feeds him for a day, but teach a man to fish and it feeds him for a lifetime. And that's one of the goals of these programs. And so we're measuring on our surveys clinical competency. And as you see, for the 3 most common disorders, anxiety, depression, ADHD, we do pretty well. But when it comes to SUD, substance use disorder, we're not doing so well, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go along. And with the shortage of child psychiatry, one of our goals is to keep the physician mid-level care, prescribing care out of not needing child psychiatry and in the primary care world. And we do that 68% of the time, which we think is pretty reasonable and been pretty stable between 60 and 70% over our course of our program. Interesting enough that that in the 32%, we are doing more and more we call bridging visits, where we know the child eventually needs a child psychiatrist but can't get in there, so we see the kid for an initial consultation, recommend how the PCP can start medication that they may not really be appropriate for, but it gets the kid started, and then they go to the child psychiatrist. Okay, you mentioned sustainability in some opening remarks, and we're in our 16th year. When I started, I never thought we'd be doing this 16 years later. We thought after 5-6 years, we probably would have taught everybody what they need to know, and that's the end. But it's really gone on. We peaked about 4 years ago with about 7,000 kids being served, and now we're down a little bit, but we're certainly not going away. And the problems keep changing a little bit, and new providers join practices, and the need continues. To be sustainable, you really need advocacy. and we've had several really stable ongoing advocacy groups, both at the professional level, the American local chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics and the local chapter of the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, as well as the Medical Society. And but also, even probably more important than the professional advocacy is the family advocacy through our 2 family advocacy groups in the state. And that has led us to having pretty consistent legislative and political support. And most of the folks in the legislature know about the programs and are supportive, and they hear about it from their constituents. They hear about it particularly from their families, those of them that have families, from their own pediatricians, and that's really been a very important link between the legislative the pediatricians or family physicians for legislative families. And then finally, we were become sustainable when several years ago the legislature mandated all commercial insurers to pay their share of the cost of the program. And that's now state law, and really makes it sustainable for the long term. And means that if we want to augment the program or add something to the budget, if the legislature appropriates us more money, then the commercial insurers pay their share. National growth, I almost don't need to talk about that today, because through the 21st Century Cures Act, there are 21 of you. It's funny that the 21 is both ways. That's obviously very exciting. 38 states and British Columbia are working on programs. I think we said 37 states, and then we have one who's in process. And that's led us to form the National Network of Child Psychiatry Access Programs. And you can go on our website. And I hope all of you are members. Doesn't cost anything. And you join us either on one of our monthly conference calls or use our listserv Basecamp to throw out questions. I think we've been getting some pretty robust discussions from many of you in that process. And I didn't put it on this slide, but if you haven't seen Brad Stein from RAND article in the Journal of the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry in October of last year, he looked at the National Family Survey of data over 13 years, and he looked at access to behavioral health. And when families were surveyed, the access to behavioral health over these 13 years has gone from 8.4% up to 11.4%, which is a 36% increase, which is wonderful. And but what was really interesting is that for states without CPAPs, and this obviously before you guys, there was a 9.5% increase, whereas states that had CPAPs, the increase was 12.3. So almost a 3% increase over with states that had access programs. So I think that really shows that we can make a difference. It's obviously not the only thing in making a difference, but we certainly are a key part of that. And I think Lauren mentioned our two programs that have expanded. We've expanded to the MCPAP for moms to address the perinatal mental health, and MCSTAP to address consultation around treatment for addiction and chronic pain, and MAT. So it's both of those have been very successful. We started the MCPAP for moms 6 years ago and MCSTAP just last year, and look like they're going to be going on. And as you probably know, the McPAP for Moms is also part of the 21st Century Cures Act, and HRSA funds 7 states, and with that, and there are 13 states altogether doing those kind of programs. And here's sort of the same map that Lauren showed, but with the yellow, you're the 21, you're the HRSA funded states, but you also get to see the other states that are doing programs without HRSA funding. And the most exciting, actually, for me at the moment is Texas, which is starting this spring with a program that's in 10 medical centers and be available to all 7 million kids in Texas. So finally, looking a little bit to the future, this year we started ASAP McPAP to address that the feeling that the PCPs didn't have as much comfort with substance use disorder issues, and so we brought on board a team of SUD experts, and the ASAP stands for Adolescent Substance Use and Addiction Program, which is run out of Boston Children's Hospital, and so that if a call comes in to the McPAP line with around a substance use issue, that the call is taken by one of their experts. And that's been great. It's been particularly helpful during the COVID-19 crisis, because I think families have found all of a sudden their kids are home, and we've had kids withdrawing, and families didn't even know they had that kind of level of problem. And also families very frustrated with kids who just avoid the shelter-in-place order, just leave because they need to get their drugs. And so brainstorming a little bit about how families can handle that. So we've over time we've done several tries to get McPAP to help schools, and finally 3 years ago, through a grant in the southeast part of our state, they sort of figured it out, and that's been very successful. And we're hoping to work on now getting that included in the regular McPAP funding and do that across the state. We're probably going to start a McPAP for autism service this year, and so we can have a team of BCBA expert licensed folks who know ABA and are available for helping kids with autism. And then there's always been the thought of more McPAP for adults, and we think once the crisis is over and people can get out in the field and do more surveying, there's going to be a group trying to survey our adult practice in the state to see if that should be another expansion. And then finally, just a brief word about the collaborative care model that I think was mentioned before in the introduction. The collaborative care model, I hope all of you know, it comes out of the University of Washington. It initially developed around adult depression, called the IMPACT model, and it's now promoted by the Ames Institute and supported by the American Psychiatric Association. So it's, you know, the elements are on the slide here: evidence-based, it's team care with a care coordinator and a behavioral health clinician or a care manager, and it sort of combines both. Measurement-based, so you treat to an outcome. Population-based, so you're tracking all children. And most importantly, you need consultation, so that when a patient isn't getting better, the PCP can call, or the care manager can call and get help. And we've implemented that in several practices. We think CPAPs can be that person that provide that function. And as more practices are following this model, I think they our programs can do that. So that's where I'm going to stop. I'm going to turn it over to Bob. Just to, you'll have my contact information. Many of you, as I mentioned at the beginning, have talked to me already over the years, but please feel free anytime to email me or call me. Thank you. Bob, your turn. By the way, I don't know, it wasn't Bob's introduction, but he actually trained at our first site at University of Massachusetts, and then went out to Washington and has really been continuing the great work that he learned at UMass. So thank you, Bob.
Thanks. Yeah, so I was one of those people trying to carry the torch early on after seeing what Massachusetts had done. And when I went out to Washington, I'll talk about the advocacy process of trying to get a program up and running, all 3 HRSA grants. So I'm currently working with the state of Alaska on one of the HRSA grants, but I'm mostly going to be talking about the service in Washington and Wyoming because they got created and continued without federal grant funding. So I thought by focusing on that, that would be helpful for everybody who's looking into the next stage after a HRSA grant were to go away in the future. So let's hit the right button. So we actually started the Washington program in 2008. So we've had 12 years, really, of operating it, and it started with Wyoming in 2011. So those programs exist because of the state legislatures choosing to support them, and because the state Medicaid divisions have said this was something that they thought was important to support and implement with the states. So we have contracts with each of those states' Medicaid divisions, and after initial startup, really are rolled into part of that state Medicaid division's ongoing annual operating budget. So there's something that is up to a state Medicaid division whether they would pursue this in such a design, but it is possible for a state Medicaid division to get some administrative level federal matching dollars for the portion of a program that is serving Medicaid clients. That's behind the scenes from my perspective. I just would share that it's not like a fee-for-service 50-50 match. It's not as generous as that in terms of what states get. But if you have a partnership with a Medicaid division, this is something that they could think about. Does that actually fit their waiver programs or however Medicaid is actually set up in the state? So that would be something to explore in your state. Oops, got to hit the right button. It took 2 years of advocacy work in Washington before we got a bill passed that created the pilot version of what became the PAL program. And I just wanted to emphasize you have to get a lot of partnerships. Pediatricians, psychiatrists, the state Medicaid representative, foster care system representatives, leaders in the legislature, hospital and university reps, advocacy groups. It isn't just a, snap your fingers and this can happen. It takes time. We also got lucky at the timing of when we did the Washington program because had we proposed a bill a year later, it probably wouldn't have been funded because of a recession that came up the following year. So timing helps. It would be difficult for all of our states to assign new dollars to consult programs right now with the COVID crisis and decreased tax dollars that many states have to deal with. So timing helps. Right button. And relationships matter when it comes to advocacy. Good idea, again, is not enough. And I could say that I'm both a pediatrician and a psychiatrist. And if I go to a legislator as a psychiatrist, frankly, there's more like, I don't know if I want to listen to you. If I go to a legislator as a pediatrician, oh, yeah, we like pediatricians. So just acknowledge that pediatricians, when it comes to legislatures, have a better voice than psychiatrists do, I think. another reason for your partnerships. And you can't get exactly what you want. Compromise is going to be required. When we started and tried to, say, hey guys, in Washington, we want to do something like Massachusetts, but in a different way, we actually came up with two ideas. One was a significant learning collaborative system, and one became what the PAL line was. We had problems with enrollment with a learning collaborative, and it had to get, so our funds got rolled into just expanding PAL. So, some of our initial ideas didn't pan out right away. How this goes. We also were going to have less money to implement a program over a wider geographic region. So that's, relative scale, the difference between Washington State and Massachusetts. And we were going to have a lot less money per covered life. So we had to do a lot of modifications. And I'm sure you all have had those discussions as well about how do you stretch your dollars best as possible. So we did things like having a centralized consult team rather than multiple sites. To try to have more operational efficiency. We did offer to meet our providers, but we couldn't go to every single office. We can't drop by every office in the state at lunchtime to enroll them. That was just completely impractical for us. So we said, well, we're going to host CME events, get those providers to come to us, and we'll meet them there, and then have the word of mouth spread in that way. That was more cost efficient as well. Full consult appointments take a lot more provider time and therefore are more costly. So while we thought it was important to offer them, we weren't pushing them as often. So over time, we realized that our provider community wasn't really demanding those as much as we thought as well. So again, that could be a little more efficient, less time to do. You could do multiple phone consults in the same time it takes to do a full consult appointment with the patient. And we wanted to prioritize psychiatrist availability, and so we tried to be creative with our scheduling so that when somebody called, they could almost always get connected directly to the psychiatrist. Over time, it's a continuous process to let people know that the service exists. We still have people calling up in Washington, even though it's been around for 12 years, said, oh, I never knew about this program. And we think, oh my gosh, how did we not ever get this message to you? But it's a continuous outreach that's required. Care coordination, somehow being able to tell the provider, here's how where you can find X in your community is a really important part of this, and I know that's all baked into the HRSA grant structure. We do other things, mandatory medication reviews with our state Medicaid divisions, and find that those two parts of the care system don't overlap very often. I liken it to, please call us, or we may have to call you. So we advise on best practice care in both of those programs, and very infrequently do we hear about a kid in both programs. We get uniformly positive praise from providers who use the service, but acknowledge there's a lot of people who just don't want, hear no evil, see no evil, don't want to get into providing mental health care, and so there's a lot of people who will never call. It's important, particularly in working with Native communities, rural communities, communities that are not ivory tower linked, to be very practical. So I have to make sure our staff are recognizing that when you're talking to a provider in a small town where there's only one therapist, and you tell the provider, oh, this kid needs to go to dialectic behavior therapy, and that's not a very helpful intervention. So we have to structure about what's practical in everybody's communities, everybody's local cultures. Even hosting our conferences, which we typically host for doctors on Saturday mornings. There was a community we went to where more than half the providers in the community are Seventh-day Adventists, and say, we're not going to show up to a Saturday morning conference. If you're going to do a conference in our community, it needs to be a different day. So, all those sort of, paying attention to the community that you're talking to. As our PAL service got growing, I realized as we added more providers, we're going to need a fidelity manual, and this is something I would recommend each of your programs think about how they deliver a consistent message. Anytime you get a group of child psychiatrists together to offer advice, you may hear very different opinions. So our guide is a free download on the web. Y'all can look at it. That's why I have the address on there. Things like parent handouts, free to reproduce rating scales, and a basic approach to different clinical problems in a flow sheet. So things like that can help, and you can audit your team as your team grows to be sure that people are giving the kind of advice they should be giving in a regular basis, and they're not hearing widely different things depending on which provider in your team they talk to. Having our providers available at the moment somebody calls is achieved by having essentially more than one doc on at a time. If you only have one person on at a time, they could be on a call, they could be doing something else, they could be eating, they could be using the bathroom. You're never going to get high rates of direct connect. So that's part of why we prioritize getting multiple services together. So our team does mandatory medication reviews for a couple of states. We do this thing I'll describe called MDT Psychiatric Consults for Wyoming. And we are providing services to more than one state. So we are more flexibly available, so that when somebody calls, 85% of the time or higher, they're getting directly connected to a psychiatrist. The mandatory med reviews, this is something that you might want to explore as you talk to a Medicaid division in your state about future partnerships. Often important to the Medicaid divisions about what's going on with child prescribing, particularly for the foster care population. And we actually predated some medication reviews in Washington before we started our PAL program. So we had that existing relationship with our Medicaid division in Washington. And in Wyoming, they were talking with their provider community about doing mandatory reviews. And essentially, the provider community said, don't do mandatory reviews on us without giving us elective consults in exchange. And so that's, they're very different, differently experienced mandatory consult as opposed to elective, but you can conduct them in such a way that they are supportive and supporting best practice care for the young person. So we've actually been doing, like I said, since 2006. For those of you unfamiliar with med doses, those are high doses. So at state, I would recommend if you do this, hit a threshold where most everybody would agree, yeah, somebody else ought to take a look at that. That's a very out of the norm practice to be using very high doses like this. We did these things over time. We started ADHD reviews, then we added antipsychotic reviews, then we added polypharmacy reviews, then we, in Washington in a stepwise fashion. In Wyoming, we did everything all at once. And when we started doing reviews, if you get into that group, provider-provider communication makes it much more collaborative and an opportunity to collaborate with the provider and say, I'm trying to, I'm going to try to help make sure that, care of this young person as good as possible. If you had to do a review based on records only, you'd have to say no way more of the time. I could go on and on about medication reviews, but if you get into that, my recommendation would be do it as a provider-provider communication, only do it for clear outlier practices, and try to be collaborative and supportive as much as possible. Another idea you could have for adding value to your state for helping to support a child psychiatry access program is offer to provide additional services around some of the state's most complex patients or a particular problem the state is having. So in Wyoming, they had identified a particular challenge with kids in foster care and the CHIN system, the need of supervision court system, being sent to long-term residential care that, in retrospect, probably wasn't appropriate. But they had a problem that they couldn't access a child psychiatrist evaluation in a timely way to actually give a better care plan idea. And so kids were getting sent to places in probably not the best way. So worked with the state and said, let's do these rapid access teleconsult appointments for these kids as requested by state foster care workers or guardian ad litem. And these are very involved consults. This is not a standard child psychiatry access program patient. It takes time to set it up, documents to be exchanged. You need to talk, we need to talk to a caseworker, we need to review all the documents, then do the televideo appointment, then dictate a big report that it helps to guide care for the young person. So it takes a minimum of a half-day provider time for one patient. But this was something that was highly valued by Wyoming, and it was all looped in as part of the partnership that we did to provide value to the state. So documenting value, we actually have a couple of articles we published about this. So for Wyoming, because these MDT psychiatric consults, we were able to show and demonstrate by working with the state how much of a total cost of care decrease this actually equated to, and rolling up all the costs of all the programs we do for them and then minus the cost benefits, we showed that there was about a 2-to-1 fiscal return on investment for the state. So we could actually show Wyoming that not only we're doing things to improve care, we're helping them save money. So that's a really important message. The other thing that we did with the state of Washington is we documented what happened to statewide use of atypical antipsychotics for the entire Medicaid population, and documented all of we did a lot of consult calls in the PAL elective consult program about atypical antipsychotics and giving advice to primary care docs who are prescribing them, and and all of the mandatory medication reviews for antipsychotics. And this is pulled from the article we published to show that the elective consult program had an impact, the mandatory reviews had an impact, which time-wise happened later, and then polypharmacy reviews had an impact, yielding a roughly 50% reduction in total statewide use of atypical antipsychotics for kids on Medicaid. And this was years ago in the past. This is a decade ago when all of these changes happened. So there has been a nationwide decrease in antipsychotic use in kids, but that happened after what we observed here. So that was all I wanted to share. We were planning, Dr. Strauss and I were planning to have time for Q&A, and I just wanted to make sure I didn't take up too much time so that we have time to talk about this. And these are the 2 articles I referenced if people need to pull something like that to help make the advocacy argument in their own state. So thank you. We'll pause for questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hilt and Dr. Strauss, for both of your presentations. We do have a few more minutes for question and answers before we break for lunch. Please remember to enter your questions into the Q&A chat pod for Dr. Strauss and Dr. Hilt. We did have a request to share the article that Dr. Strauss referenced during his presentation, the Journal of the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry article that was uploaded into the download pod for you all to access. And I think some of the other articles that Dr. Hilt referenced, he listed in his presentation. So we'll give folks a few minutes. If you're thinking of questions, please enter them into the Q&A pod now.
And this is Dr. Hilt again. I was just going to share, Dr. Strauss had mentioned a variety of new consult programs in Massachusetts that have been value add-ons to the MCPAP program. We've actually been doing the same thing in Washington here. So we've actually just started up a statewide mental health referral service for parents to do the calling around and find available providers as a new service, and we have a school consultation program as well. And our state has implemented a new adult psychiatric consultation line as well. So exactly like Dr. Strauss says, once you get the ball rolling, other things can come along and join up with it.
Bob, I think you also have perinatal, right?
Perinatal, I didn't even mention the PAL Telehealth for Moms. We do also have the perinatal line, and that has been operational already for a few years, and has been looped in to the bill on private insurance plan funding.
Thanks to you both. And I think even our Division Director, Lauren Ramos, expressed interest in connecting with you, Dr. Strauss, in the future on MCPAP for autism in the future. So we will note that and connect with you on that. So I did have a question. This question is from Susan Griffin for Dr. Hilt. Can you tell us a little more about the Saturday CME events that you've held, i.e. topics, how you were able to get folks engaged in attending those Saturday sessions?
Sure. Yeah, we plan out a conference season a year in advance. We host 4 events a year in Washington, a couple a year in Wyoming, and we're doing a mix of in-person and televideo for Alaska. We use our hospital's CME office to get the Category 1 CME credit set up for these events. We make it free for attendees to come. So we typically do it on a Saturday morning. We'll host a breakfast and a snack because people like it when they've been fed, and plan to move the site where we do these talks around our state. So it took probably about 6 years before we actually hosted an event in Seattle. Our purpose was to get out into the state, into all the into the more rural communities, to make it an experience as a local CME event. So we hosted at a hotel conference room, for instance, or at the local hospital. And all of our consultants take turns in delivering talks, and we do it on the rotating cycle of the various greatest hits in child mental health: ADHD, depression, anxiety, substance use, autism, disruptive behavior, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay. Thank you so much for that, Dr. Hilt. We also received another question from Dee Dee Raymond. How would you identify all of your practices? For the percent of practices enrolled, what claims data are you referring to? I think that question was directed for Dr. Strauss.
Sure, thank you for the question. Well, when we started, there was no all-payer claim database, so we couldn't use claims. When you start, it really is just Google and just going to the local communities. It's very hard. We found it very hard. Some places may find it easier to get lists from even our local chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics. They would send out, they were very happy to send out notices that we were available, but they're not supposed to turn over their list. The Board of Registration in Medicine obviously knows, but they're not allowed to turn over their list. So we ran across a lot of bureaucratic hindrances to developing that list of practices. And but it is, if you Google primary care for a particular community, you will get all the practice.
Thank you,
So
Dr.
thank goodness
Strauss.
for the internet.
Yes, thank goodness for the internet. So I received another question from Susan. Who are you consulting with in school settings? Is it counselors or teachers?
I can answer that from the message perspective. We've done a little. We actually piloted initially with counselors, and it didn't work as well as the current program is primarily focused on the nurses, and they feel comfortable talking to our consultants, and it's interesting, they want less around individual kids because they've got all sorts of issues about getting permission to talk to us about individual kids. They like to have particularly CME kind of sessions around particular disorders or problems. And but what's nice with housing the school program within the regular CPAP is that we can suggest to the nurse, if they have a kid in their office who's struggling, to have the family call their pediatrician, and they will tell them that, you remind your pediatrician that they can call McPAP and get help. So we sort of close the loop that way, but there are all sorts of FERPA is the HIPAA of schools, and it can get in the way of doing specific individual student consultations, but the nurses really are appreciating the more general education about what to do with general problems, and then they use that when the kids come into their office. Bob, what's happening out your way?
So we're in the startup phase of it. I was just actually on a conference call with the school yesterday. We're actually setting up business associate agreements with the pilot schools that we're working with, so that they will eventually be able to tell us specific identifiers about the students that they're that would like to talk about with us. And we're going to be talking primarily with school counselors, but we're going to open it up to teachers and other school staff to speak to our psychologists. We have some psychologists who are going to be the consultants for that, to speak to them directly. But we're just in the startup phase of that, so I don't have a lot of other experience to share.
One of our experiences is that the nursing side doesn't talk to the counseling side very successfully. So and when we started on the counseling side, we got a lot of grief from our Department of Public Health, who runs the school health programs, that we weren't helping the school nurses. So it's a real sensitive issue, and it's interesting. We're covering like 1,000 schools in the southeast part of the state now, and they're beginning to get calls from the counseling side who have found that once they see that the nurses are getting all this help, they want some of it too. But again, because as opposed to what Bob's trying to do, we decided not, just a matter of scale, we decided not to deal with individual kids.
Thank you for that response. Kind of piggybacking off of that kind of conversation. This question is from Bethany in Virginia. Are you all aware of programs using school-based health centers for this service?
Well, school-based health centers, if they have, say, a nurse practitioner in the school, they can call the CPAP, the access line already, and didn't need a special school consult program. For us, it's expansion beyond that medical provider role that is a unique thing.
Yeah, same in Massachusetts. All our school-based health centers are enrolled because they all have. There are actually fewer of them than there used to be, but those that have some kind of prescriber are automatically enrollable.
Okay. We also got a comment from Sandy Fritsch, who we'll be hearing from later today. She mentioned that they are working with school-based mental health centers and have some providers from school-based health centers actually participating in their ECHO series. So Sandy, maybe you can touch base on that briefly later during your presentation. Another question comes from Stacy White. Can Massachusetts elaborate about getting insurers to pay for the cost of the program? Is this through reimbursement for consult calls or direct consultations with families or other supportive funding?
Yeah, thank you for that question. It's not around, it's not directed for specific patient contacts. It's for the overall program cost. And so it's done at the state level where our program is run through the Department of Mental Health, and Department of Mental Health bills the insurers for their share, and there's a complicated formula to split up the cost by the size of the insurer. So basically what happens is right now our program is appropriated at $3.7 million, including the moms, and we 56 to 58% of the calls are commercial. The kids have commercial insurance, and therefore the commercial payers have to, as a whole, pay for that proportion of the program. And so we tell them what percent of the calls are commercial, and therefore what percent of the appropriation needs to be made up by the insurers, and then the Department of Mental Health splits the cost up using the formula that the state has developed. We actually allow, when we do face-to-face visits, those visits are billed by the person doing the consult directly to the insurer. And if we had the mandate when we started, we probably wouldn't have done that. We would have just included the cost, the whole cost of the program, and billed it at the central level. But right now, face-to-face are billed individually, but the general cost of the program, which is billed centrally. That answer your question?
Yes, thank you so much for that clarification. We have about 2 more questions. So I think this is a great question for both of you. What do you feel are the most important factors to primary care providers to get them to engage with your programs? And that question is from Tom Schultz.
I think the great thing about how Massachusetts has done it is being able to go to offices and shake hands and meet people face to face. Calling just this number where you don't know the person and you're not quite sure what that experience is going to be like. You're not sure if they're going to try to talk you into doing something you don't want to do. It's a barrier to get that first call. And we found, without being able to do these office drop-ins, that face-to-face meeting or word of mouth where somebody you know and trust says, hey, you ought to try this, was the most effective way to get new callers to call the service. The yield of just getting, say, mailers in the, something in the mail that says, hey, call this number, is not that great, to adopt a new habit like that.
I just add, I think, it's different than it was 16 years ago. I think pediatricians are more recognizing that behavioral health has to be a part of their practice, because the infectious disease, and except for the last month or so, has gone down, and acute illness, and with all the immunizations and all, they have actually even less ear infections. So they've done more, they need to do more behavioral health, and that I think has helped as new practices have opened up, them immediately wanting to have some help. The other thing is to really get the support of their peers to work through the your Academy of Pediatrics, local chapter, and as Bob says, start somewhere and then go by word of mouth. I think you can. We also had some support at the beginning from our partners at Medicaid, who really pushed it with the practices that have large Medicaid populations.
Thanks to you both. We're 1 minute over, but if Dr. Hilt, if you can answer this question in 1 minute or less, that would be great. Gary Maslow asked if Dr. Hilt, you can speak more about the Medicaid match arrangement or process.
So it's behind the scenes to us and as running the consult program itself. We just have a contract with the Medicaid division, and behind the scenes, they can list the Medicaid proportion of what we're doing as something as, the terminology that I've learned to use is Medicaid administrative level match. I think it's somewhere on the order of about a 30% match rate that a state Medicaid division can get some federal administrative support for just their infrastructure of running a Medicaid system in the state, which is different than the fee-for-service unit match of each billed encounter. So that's about the greatest level of detail I can offer, because that's behind the scenes to me.
Thanks so much, Dr. Hilt, for your quick response. Thanks to you both for sorry, go ahead.
Okay, I was just going to add that when you're dealing with sustainability, one of the things we've also discovered is that the percent of our calls are pretty much parallel the percent of the presence of the in the community of that particular insurance. So for us, like Blue Cross is like 28% of the membership of the community, and that's pretty much what percent we get from them. So it's interesting that one would think that the problems may be different with in different communities, but the prevalence of mental health issues is pretty universal. So that's why it's so important to get that commercial component.
Thanks, Dr. Strauss, and thanks to you, Dr. Hilt, as well for your robust presentations and willingness to address questions. Dr. Strauss and Dr. Hilt did include their contact information in the slides that are still available in the download pod. Many of the questions and some of the additional questions that came in were a lot around the expansion to schools. So hopefully we can touch base with Dr. Hilt and Dr. Strauss about that and share that with the awardees following the meeting. So now we're going to break for lunch. And if any of your questions weren't addressed during this time, we'll be sure to follow up after the meeting. And a correction, the slides are not available in the chat pod, but we will be sharing the slides in the next couple of days. So we'll go ahead and break for lunch. We will be returning and resuming at 1 o'clock, and we'll be starting promptly at 1 o'clock to hear from our evaluation consultants, JBS International. So I hope that everyone enjoys their lunch, and hoping that you're able to rejoin us at 1 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time. Thank you.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back from the lunch break. It is 1:02 right now, so we should go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining us today for JBS International's presentation on Program Adaptations and Planning for Sustainability, Considerations for Evaluation. JBS International is the evaluation contractor funded by HRSA to conduct an independent outcome and impact evaluation of PMHCA and screening for treatment for maternal depression and related behavioral disorders programs. JBS provides evaluation capacity building technical assistance, including hosting webinars to our awardees. Today's presentation is one of those webinars. It's exciting to see how programs have adapted and continue to operate and thrive in these changing conditions. Today's presentation will discuss the real-time adjustments that are being made as needed in collaboration with your project officers and the importance of documenting these changes in order to continue to implement robust programs in changing times. We have set aside some time for questions at the end of JBS's presentation, so please feel free to post questions in the chat pod as they come to you during the presentation. So I'd like to start by introducing our presenters from the evaluation team, Susan Hayashi, Melinda Campopiano, and Amanda Gamerick. Starting with Dr. Hayashi, she is a JBS Vice President and Project Director for the HRSA MCHB evaluation. She brings 25 plus years experience in program evaluation and communication research projects, medical education, health communication, and technical assistance capacity building. Her work supports federal agencies, medical professional organizations, and other organizations to maximize the impact of their programs. She brings expertise in directing multi-site and cross-site evaluations of programs delivering and expanding integrated behavioral health in primary care settings and to underserved and disadvantaged populations. Dr. Campopiano is a physician who is board certified in family medicine and addiction medicine. She practiced primary care and addiction medicine for 10 years in urban and rural settings, integrating primary care and behavioral health, and was Chief Medical Officer at the Center for Substance Abuse Treatment at SAMHSA for 5 years before joining JBS. As a Senior Medical Advisor at JBS, she applies both clinical experiences and policy and implementation expertise across projects for federal agencies, states, and other organizations. Dr. Gamerick is the evaluation lead for the HRSA MCHB evaluation and is a principal and senior researcher with JBS International. Dr. Gamerick is a licensed psychologist with federal and state-funded research and health program evaluation experience focused on directing, implementing, and managing cross-site evaluations of federally funded behavioral health programs, as well as directing delivery of technical assistance to federally funded grantees across different behavioral health-related grant portfolios. She has expertise with mixed method data collection and has conducted analyses using qualitative and quantitative data sets that vary in size and content. So welcome, Drs. Hayashi, Campopiano, and Gamerick. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Kara. Thank you so much, Kara. We appreciate having the opportunity to be with both the PMHCA and MDRBD awardees today. The main items we'll touch upon today are listed here. Oh, let me just advance the slides. Okay, there we go. For the webinar, we're going to give an update on the MCHB evaluation and review the different program components and adaptations that awardees are making, and then review some of the implementation around telehealth and considerations for the evaluation, as well as beginning to plan for sustainability and considerations with the evaluation. And then lastly, with some next steps of where we're headed for the evaluation. In addition, wanted to tell you to feel free to post any questions in the chat box during the presentation. We will also have the opportunity to address any questions at the end of the session. So thank you. So a few updates regarding the MCHB evaluation. As we shared on our calls with you, the OMB package is currently under review with the Federal OMB Office. In the last week, we received a few, what I'd say, called minor questions, the kind of questions I'd like to receive on an OMB package, and we have submitted clarifying responses. So hopefully that means everything is moving along, and we'll continue to work with OMB as other questions or they need clarification on anything. We've enjoyed speaking with each of you in February and March when we had the calls. We really appreciate learning how you're implementing your programs and the nuances that are required to make your respective programs successful. Lastly, we have also been developing infographics which should be shared with you by your project officers in the coming weeks and months. In terms of where we've been with the webinars and where we're headed for today, I wanted to put this graphic up again, and the red highlight is what we'll be covering today. In part, we've numbered them to facilitate for you and sharing as new staff come on board if there's something you need to refer back to some of the topics that were covered. So we have covered the foundational pieces of the program throughout the previous webinars and have reviewed information on practice and providers, encounters, program naming and branding, telehealth, and evaluation of telehealth, and training evaluation. Today we will discuss the program adaptations and sustainability and related considerations for evaluation. Throughout these webinars, we've had the chance to hear about your programs, and what you've shared has facilitated learning from each other. In addition, over the last several weeks, programs have shared adaptations made over the recent months, as well as information about the changing landscape in enrolled practices, telehealth service delivery, reduced patient volume, furloughed health professionals. In coordination, we thought it would be helpful to compile these at a high level and allow you to determine if making additional adaptations would be helpful to your program. Some of the overall themes that emerged are around promotion and dissemination efforts, provider practice enrollment, training, and telehealth. Before we go into that, we have a polling question for you to learn a bit more about the changes enrolled providers are facing. Okay, so if I'm going to ask for some assistance in terms of how awardees respond, there we go. Okay, thank you. So now if you can take a moment and respond to this, then we'll go in. The question is, how is behavioral health care service delivery by enrolled providers and practices impacted by the current environment? Okay, we still see some responses coming in, which is great, and please just take your time. And Mindy, I see your comment in the chat box here that it could have increased due to telehealth, more patients willing to connect based on convenience of telehealth. So I'll just welcome anyone to put some comments in the chat box, And we can refer to that as well if you see something that may not be addressed in the response option. Okay. So I think what we'll do is we'll pause the, just use this as a summary here so everyone can see what the results look like. And, with some of these last minute, we see with how has the behavioral health service delivery been impacted, and the increase due to mental health concerns and are the most popular responses. And then we see a number of reductions in terms of some challenges with telehealth, reduced due to insufficient revenue, and staff social distancing, as well as patients deferring health care. And I think being able to look at those, I think, Mindy, your point is well taken, that that we may also see increases due to increases in telehealth or the convenience of using telehealth. I think being able to share that with the healthcare providers and the types of services that are being offered would be maybe of value at this point, as well as the and we know from the responses that some of you are already doing that, but also that there's increasing literature about the likelihood of the need for behavioral health services for both pediatric patients as well as adults and health professionals too, as they deal with the many stressors with this. The current situation. So we wanted to be able to see this as a complement to some of the other responses that have been provided. And I see there's some additional comments being put in with regard to the personal protective equipment, the PPE, not being available. And some folks are seeing that, and some programs are seeing that things are not so changed, but maybe a slight change due to the social distancing. Present needs due to system confusion. So we appreciate you sharing all these components. I think that this is also helpful for HRSA to see contextual pieces that could be impacting the programs, and being able to either make responses, or as we're working on the evaluation, having more understanding of how the on-the-ground impact for your programs. So thank you for participating in the poll. And I'm going to, there we go, back to the slides. So thank you so much. And in terms of going back to what I was saying about the examples of program adaptations, in hearing from Dr. Strauss and Dr. Hill, it's the change in making adaptations is inevitable for these programs. While we're talking about it now, it struck me in listening to them that there were things that worked, there were things that didn't work, and all of you are seeing that as well. And it seems that a key factor for the success of these behavioral health access programs is making it work for your state and communities. And the nimbleness that you're demonstrating will likely be an essential part of your long-term planning. And the quotes that Lauren shared in the first presentations in the morning, the payoffs are immense. Health professionals are getting the support that they need, as well as the patients that they serve. And we know you're all advocates of the programs. It's just that those pieces particularly struck me listening to those presentations. In terms of examples of the program adaptations, for promotion and dissemination efforts, leveraging technology appears to be the theme. We have all become adept in delivering messages and engaging in target audiences virtually. One thing to consider is that many of you had previously shared the importance of visiting a practice or essentially what was a face-to-face engagement and promotion. So as airwaves become more crowded and vying for attention of health professionals, it will likely be important to think about and track your promotion, how your promotion efforts are working. The same is true for the provider and practice enrollment. Being aware of the shifts and furloughs and reduced patient volumes that health professionals are reporting. But the need for behavioral health access programs remain paramount. As we progress through this time of rapid change, how your messaging may need to shift to resonate with health professionals in your state will be likely important. So to delve into a little bit more detail that some of the awardees provided with their adaptations, some awardees are offering Zoom sessions that are with HIPAA compliant licenses. So sharing that may be of value with providers. If you have a HIPAA compliant web-based system, being able to do video chats and consultation and service delivery, that may be a hook or a way of addressing comfort with enrolled providers. And for health professionals facing reduced patient volume, some have shared that they have more time to enroll and or participate in training. So if you're looking at offering them virtually and then being able to find times around engagement, tracking that for the participants, that would be that could be helpful. And some awardees are also now including health professional wellness sessions as part of their training, and so allowing health professionals to receive personal support with the stressors that they're facing, as well as the other practices and helping their patients. So there seems to be an increased need, and as I mentioned, the literature does support that for behavioral health needs for health professionals, and so that may be another way to engage, and some programs are having success with that. And then moving along to some examples, of the example I just gave with the training and the health professionals. And really we're seeing a mix in terms of the implementation of Project ECHO. The in-person delays in in-person training, I think that's fairly obvious at this point with the social distancing. But so some awardees are continuing with ECHO programs as scheduled, but several are also reporting a delayed implementation, and that may be due to the health professionals maybe not having the capacity, or the reduced patient volume, and then not and possibly being furloughed, and seeing more and more related to that. And then lastly, with the telehealth, the shift, the literature has also really provided some meaningful insights about how where health professionals were resistant to, or for those that were resistant to telehealth services, that there really has been an explosion, and when it became the only option, there was quick adoption of telehealth. And then while Dr. Campopiano will speak more about this shortly, keeping abreast of those changes, like with the reimbursement changes that CMS just put out, would be probably helpful for the awardees, so that as they are working on and thinking about the telehealth piece, having a resource helping the health professionals with those kinds of adaptations may be another opportunity for a win-win for the enrolled providers and practices. So I think we can really see a robust set of program adaptations that all of you are making, and really depending on how your program was being implemented. Some awardees were initially more focused on particular regions and have made a decision to go more statewide at this point, sooner than maybe expected. And so there are different opportunities that exist even in these changing times. So I will now pass it on to Dr. Campopiano, and she will continue with the adaptations for telehealth implementation.
Thank you, Susan. Good afternoon and good morning to those of you out west. I get to spend the next few minutes talking with you about some federal level changes related to telehealth and the work of your programs. All right, that loaded pause was just me making sure that that you can hear me. So I will carry on. As you well know, there have been extensive changes lately to quite a few federal regulations. I'm just going to focus on a couple of things that are most relevant to mental health and substance use disorder prevention and treatment. So the first adaptation or change that I want to highlight is the notification of enforcement discretion for telehealth remote communications. This was issued by the Office of Civil Rights in the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. This notification of enforcement discretion allows healthcare providers to use non-public facing audio or video communication technology to assess or treat patients, even if it's not HIPAA compliant. Now, what this means is providers can use things like FaceTime, Facebook Messenger, video chat, Google Hangouts video, Zoom, and Skype to care for patients. Now, the benefit of this is that the provider can continue to care for patients with minimal IT support and little initial cost. It is very important to note, however, that this change is temporary. At some point, they will resume fully enforcing HIPAA, and these free applications will no longer be usable. Using them now can allow practices to continue operating as a bridge to adopting a HIPAA-compliant platform for telehealth. It's unlikely that the telehealth genie will go back in the bottle. So now is the time to think about helping your practices and providers apply their existing mental health screening, assessment, and treatment skills in the telehealth environment, and build this into trainings that you may have already developed. Now, before I move on to the next slide, let me just point out that if your enrolled providers and practices opt to use these otherwise non-HIPAA compliant audio video technologies to deliver patient care, they should use every privacy and encryption feature available in the applications and practice good telehealth hygiene by verbally obtaining the patient's consent to interact via the specific technology at the start of the visit and documenting this. Now, I am going to try to advance my slide. Okay. So, other federal adaptations relevant to your enrolled practices and providers or potential enrollees have to do with Title 42 of the Code of Federal Regulations, Part 2, which governs the privacy requirements that apply to mental health and substance use disorder records. And these privacy requirements exceed the HIPAA privacy requirements. Now, there have been a series of changes made in the last few years to these regulations, but I'm only going to address the recent temporary exemptions to these privacy requirements. Without going into too much detail, under normal circumstances, records about mental health and substance use disorder treatment cannot be shared without a signed release of information, an actual piece of paper at this point. For the time being, however, a treating professional can release a patient's mental health or substance use related information to another treating provider with only the patient's verbal permission. Now, this temporary change is in place to support continuity of care for people who must self-isolate or have to relocate temporarily and cannot go to the provider's office to sign a release to have their information shared. Your enrolled practices and providers may be unaware of this temporary change since it applies to mental health and substance use disorder specialists and not generally primary care, pediatrics, or OB-GYN. Even the patients may assume that they cannot access their own records because they can't go to their program to sign a release. Information about this temporary change would be very helpful to disseminate if you can. Just to be clear, there has always been an allowance in 42 CFR Part 2 to allow the disclosure of patient information during a medical emergency. But the ability to provide a verbal release will allow better communication in medical situations short of a true life-threatening medical emergency. Now, before I move on, let me just say some healthcare providers and settings are swamped right now, and as we saw, others are a little bit slow because people are staying home or they're required to stay home or they're just afraid to come in. So if you have enrolled providers or practices that are experiencing a lull, this is a perfect opportunity to get to know their other community service providers and establish a rapport that will facilitate care coordination and community linkages both now and in the future. Let me get to the right slide. There we go. The Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services and the Drug Enforcement Administration have also acted quickly on a number of fronts, including billing and coding and telehealth. I'm going to focus here on a few changes that may help your programs meet workforce needs in the short term and help enrollees continue to care for patients. First, the requirement to be licensed in the state where the patient is physically located to bill for telehealth services provided to that patient or prescribe controlled substances to that person is temporarily suspended at the federal level. This means that enrolled practices and providers who operate close to a state border can care for their Medicare and Medicaid patients and patients who require controlled substances for addiction treatment or management of other mental illness via telehealth, even if the patient resides across the state line and is communicating with the provider from that location. So this is an example of requirements for which a blanket waiver has been issued under CMS 1135 waiver program. Now, blanket 1135 waivers are what allows for the suspension of Medicare and Medicaid reimbursement limitations on telehealth as well. Your state or territory is the entity who must request an amendment or waiver. This might be an opportunity to look to your state partner and for opportunities to improve access by amending your state plans. Taken together, the changes I've reviewed in these three slides represent an opportunity to support your program's efforts to promote behavioral health integration in your communities. I'm going to hand you to Amanda next. Amanda?
Great. Thank you, Melinda and Kara and Susan, and hello, everyone. Happy to be here to talk with you today. So Susan talked earlier about some potential program adaptations to your different program components in light of the current environment, and Melinda expanded on that as it relates to the current telehealth environment. The next presentation from the Telehealth Resource Centers will focus more on telehealth, but now I want to talk a bit about evaluation considerations related to potential program adaptations. Currently, there are policy and care delivery changes that may affect how your programs are being implemented, and if these changes, as well as how your programs are adapting to these changes, are not documented, this may be a missed opportunity to, 1, showcase important successes for your program as you adapt to changing conditions, as well as 2, have information that will allow you to make longer-term shifts in program implementation. Oh, sorry about that. In terms of evaluation considerations related to potential program adaptations and promotion and dissemination efforts, provider and practice enrollment, training, and telehealth, a key consideration is timely tracking of any adaptations to be able to provide context for your data and evaluation findings and identify real-time opportunities for quality improvement given the evolving environment in which your programs are being implemented. Noting the dates and nature of policies that are implemented will provide your programs with contextual information as you're analyzing and interpreting your data and sharing program results down the road. Now, in terms of promotion and dissemination efforts, this tracking may include noting any different ways in which you outreach to providers, practices, in the community about your programs. If possible, tracking the success of these outreach efforts and reaching your target audiences will be informative to future promotion and dissemination efforts. With respect to provider and practice enrollment, documenting shifts in enrollment approaches, for example, from in-person to virtual, and the types of virtual methods used, such as email, phone, or via video platform, will be useful to determine provider or practice preference and effectiveness of the approach. Also, it will be helpful to track rates of enrollment, whether increased due to increased need for behavioral health consultation and support, or decreased due to shifting priorities for healthcare providers or program decisions to delay enrollment. Finally, in terms of why providers and practices are enrolling, looking at the behavioral health consultation needs and any potential changes in types of support needed will help to identify changing needs and may inform training development. Now, in terms of training, it will be important to document shifts from in-person to virtual training, as well as frequency of training. If you have been and continue to collect post-training feedback, this information can continue to be used to assess satisfaction with the trainings, but also to provide feedback on the effectiveness of virtual training, especially if this is a new approach for your program. This will also offer any information about new or emerging topics for training that providers are requesting. Also, noting any gaps in training provision due to provider availability will provide overall context to your local evaluation findings regarding frequency and timing of training. For telehealth, as Melinda discussed, there have been changes in telehealth implementation and reimbursement that will affect how telehealth is being used by enrolled practices and providers. One area to track may be adoption of telehealth by enrolled providers and practices for provision of behavioral health supports and services, as well as any barriers to adoption of telehealth. These barriers may point to a need for training to translate in-person behavioral health skills to a telehealth environment. Next, we want to talk briefly about planning for longer-term program sustainability and related evaluation considerations. Dr. Strauss and Dr. Hild addressed sustainability earlier this morning, and there will also be what looks to be a very interesting session on sustainability tomorrow morning. And we understand that you are in the midst of implementing your programs and making program adjustments as needed, but also thinking about how to sustain your program long-term. We've listed on this slide a few potential key elements and overarching approaches to program sustainability. When thinking about evaluation considerations and sustainability, it's important to consider your approach and how you can leverage your program data to support this. In terms of sustainability, your programs have a huge potential impact in the long term because they're getting at the behavioral health needs and supports that are needed, now more than ever, in many communities. Your programs are creating opportunities for access to behavioral health as part of primary care and a more confident care system in terms of knowing where to get support, addressing behavioral health issues, and ultimately building behavioral health capacity. Your communications about your program can have a big impact for sustainability, and it's important to figure out how to communicate your program data in a way that resonates. So the powerful quotes that Lauren shared from providers earlier today, as well as what Dr. Strauss shared regarding advocacy and communicating with legislative representatives, as well as what Dr. Hilt shared regarding the need for ongoing conversation with state stakeholders and documenting the value of programs, are good examples of communications and communicating program data to support sustainability. For a previous program evaluation that we worked on, evaluating a behavioral health intervention, more so than data showing the value of the program and visually appealing policy briefs, it was testimonies from healthcare professionals that swayed the legislature to understanding the value of the program, resulting in incorporation into the state budget as a line item. So we would love to hear about your program's approaches to sustainability and how you plan to use data to support this. But before moving on to the Q&A, we want to give a quick update about HRSA MCHB evaluation next steps. As Susan mentioned previously, the HRSA MCHB evaluation OMB package has been submitted and is under review, and we're expecting OMB approval for the HRSA MCHB evaluation data collection tools this summer. As discussed during our TA calls with you this winter, data collection will begin with the Program Implementation Survey of Project Directors in summer 2020, and then in fall 2020, the Healthcare Provider Survey and Practice Level Survey. As discussed during our calls, we'll be in touch as that time nears to coordinate regarding survey administration, whether your program will be administering the surveys or if you chose to have JBS administer the surveys. For our next HRSA MCHB evaluation webinar on July 7th, we will focus on data collection considerations related to HRSA required reporting, as well as HRSA MCHB evaluation data collection. For example, issues we may cover include defining and counting enrolled providers and practices, data collection from sole provider practices, timing of data collection, and other data-related issues. And for our final webinar for this project year in August 2020, with the date to be determined pending receipt of OMB approval, we will focus on kicking off the HRSA MCHB evaluation data collection. And with that, we would like to open it up to any questions you may have or any comments about your program's adaptations and if and how you plan to collect and use data related to these adaptations, as well as to support program sustainability. And you can write your questions in the chat box. Thank you.
I think this is Susan Hayashi speaking again. At this point, we have an opportunity for questions and answers from those of you who are on the participating in the webinar. And as Amanda said, you can put them in the chat box, and then we're happy to respond to them. Thank you. Just wanted to, some things that we wanted to hear from you on was to see any actual documentation that you're already doing around the adaptations you're making to the program. So anything, if you're using particular metrics or how, what you're using, or any sort of cut points or things like that to inform program changes and planning for the future. So if you want to respond to some things in the chat box, we would appreciate hearing from you. Okay, and some pieces that are being shared are that some folks have started a timeline of significant events and dates to stay at home. There's, for example, stay-at-home orders, changes to evaluation, changes to chat box questions, and in terms of the stay-at-home orders and changes to evaluation and staffing. So each one of those pieces, by having markers for those significant events, in 6 months and a year, as you're looking at your program data, there'll be the opportunity to overlay that. And this is particularly important because with the adaptations, it's not a one-size-fits-all. So each awardee state is making different decisions, and the impact is morphing in different ways. So that's really an excellent approach that we feel, and things that we have been looking at on our end in terms of the evaluation activities as well. And that will allow down the road, we really think that there may be some opportunities to show some wins and unexpected gains for the programs because of the changes and the increased need with behavioral health. And then we received another comment that as part of the 6-month follow-up survey for enrolled providers, questions have now been asked about how the COVID-19 situation has impacted their needs for support around mental health issues for their patients. And so this particular awardee will begin getting responses in a few weeks. So depending on how you've structured feedback from enrolled providers and practices, being able to get that documentation of it quickly, and this is it looks like it's convenient for this awardee because it's as part of a regular follow-up survey, the 6-month survey that's being implemented. If you're not doing that, there may be it may be a good opportunity to get some quick feedback of initial pieces and then follow up at various increments. So each one of those pieces may be helpful. And just want to add, I want to give Amanda Gamerick the opportunity to respond as well to some of these comments. So And I want to also call everybody's attention to, there's some, in the Q&A chat box, you can see some discussions going on right now where questions are being asked. And I just clicked on mine, and they seem to have disappeared into the air. So,
right.
And I'll just let Dr. Gamerick jump in now. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, great. Sorry. No, I was just saying these are some great comments, and we actually got a comment from an awardee for the other awardees asking if anyone has received feedback from their stakeholders about data points that may be particularly useful as you think about post-grant funding sustainability. So if you chat those to us, we can share those with everyone. I know you can't see these responses, but we can definitely share data points that will be helpful post-grant funding. We also had an awardee share that as part of their web-based resources, they've added a page of COVID-19 related websites and documents that have been offered through various national organizations. So I think it's helpful to kind of share that information and get the information out there for your enrolled providers and practices. Other awardees have started to look at rates of enrollments and contacts in relation to what's happened with the shutdown. Looks like they're getting some contextual information from practitioners about what their needs are and trying to balance showing that they're available, but not overwhelming providers during this time as they're adjusting to the new normal here. That awardee also has started a monthly newsletter, and it's featuring COVID resources as well. So thanks for all the great comments. Looks like we might have a few more coming.
Okay, I think there's maybe one more comment maybe coming in, and then we'll be able to, the theme that I'm seeing here is that combination of the nimbleness that the programs between what you've shared that you were starting to do and then being able to continue and have those data points as you move forward, then you'll be able to really have a sense of impacts and changes and also identify opportunities to make further adjustments. And another resource was just shared, and that was that the National Child Traumatic Stress Network has great COVID resources for parents and families. And so there's a website address that was provided, and we'll be able to share that. So we appreciate the sharing of resources. There was also a comment from Rachel that was empty, and we just wanted to see if there was anything that you had maybe got deleted accidentally or wanted to add.
There was another question from an awardee about whether there's a template of some sort for documenting and tracking changes. I think that's a great idea. Somebody shared through the chat that they had developed that timeline, and that's something that, as Susan mentioned, we're looking at internally, thinking about when changes are happening. I don't know that there's a template developed, but this would be a great potential topic for the listserv as well to see what other resources other awardees are using to track these sorts of programmatic changes.
And another awardee just shared that in terms of planning for sustainability, I think being able to show for, just say, let's say health emergencies, hopefully that we're not going to have another pandemic here, but being able to track potential time saved from practice to psychiatry clinic, also potential reduction in the use of Medicaid transport services, anything that you're able to say, and be able to show with, increased patient outcomes, increased access to services, and reduction of other services, and especially high-cost services, that can be a real win-win with any of the data and metrics for informing pieces. Then Susan Young also shared that some resources in a previous comment are available at the copecap.org under resources. So again, we'll make those things available to awardees so that you know where to find the information that everyone is generously sharing.
And then a few other items related to the tracking. Sorry. The awardee who originally shared that they're developing a timeline said that right now that's in an Excel spreadsheet with dates, descriptions, and tags and categories. And then another awardee shared that for informing sustainability, they're tracking potential time saved from practice to their psychiatry clinic and potential reduction in use of Medicaid transport services. So some good ideas there around data to inform sustainability planning.
So, as always, that's from the previous webinars. We've so appreciated hearing from all of you with awardees and presentations that have been done. But here, again, it's evident with the real summary of different ways that you are being proactive to document adaptations and obtain important information that will allow you to better interpret down the road. I would also say really making data-driven decisions as you make the program adaptations. The things that maybe had worked aren't working, but also things that didn't work may now be working. So there may be some real different kinds of opportunities, and we know these programs are more critical than ever given the current situation. We did receive a question here that if when you're the awardee that put in time saved, being able to document that. Could you share a few more details about what that means regarding how that's measured and being able to report on that? We'll give a moment to just be able to obtain that information. So that was around time saved from a practice in the psychiatry clinic, and had a question related to that.
And we can always try to get an answer offline if that awardee is no longer available.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that sounds good. And we'll follow up and then share that as a summary to share along with some of the links that were provided. And I just want to see, I think Kelly Dawson, one of the HRSA program officers, had indicated that we might be moving to the next session a few minutes sooner, and so we'll just get an update on that in terms of moving through. But I think our session is starting to wrap up. But I do think we just received a response in terms of the time saved. So I will address that. So for each encounter, particularly encounters that may have a likelihood to result in referral to their psychiatry clinic, they use Google Maps to get amount of time each way from calling provider's practice to the clinic. So it's a rough measure of time saved. So by not having to make that trip, there's really amount of, you get a work efficiency measure essentially, and not having to spend the resources and time to be able to get there and back. So that's a very good way to track something like that and looking at time saved. And Dustin Sarver is willing to provide some additional information later, so we can follow up with him and make sure everyone gets a more complete response on how to address that particular measure. So thank you for sharing. Okay. Well, I think at this point we've got our contact information there, and I think most of you have that already, and I think we'll hand it back to HRSA and the host here, and we appreciate this opportunity to be with all of you again. So we wish everyone the best, and we know that we'll be in touch as we move forward with the evaluation. So thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much, Susan, Melinda, and Amanda, for your presentation. Really, this is Cara Dela Cruz. I'm back. Really appreciate your work as our evaluation contractor, and especially your ability to adjust the webinar topics to what is most timely. So thank you so much. And I know we're just a couple minutes early, but we do have our presenters here for our next presentation. Next up is the Telehealth Resource Centers. So I'll turn it over to Kelly Dawson.
Thanks, Cara, and thanks to the JBS team also. So up next, as Cara mentioned, we have Natasha Manzanero, who will provide an overview of the Telehealth Resource Center and the Federal Telehealth Technical Assistance available to HRSA programs that many of you are familiar with. Natasha is a public health analyst at the Health Resources and Services Administration, Federal Office of Rural Health Policy, Office of the Advancement of Telehealth. She currently serves as the program coordinator for the Telehealth Resource Center program and the Rural Health Information Technology Policy Lead. She first joined HRSA in November 2010 as a project officer in the Bureau of Primary Health Care, and in 2011 she joined the Office of Health IT and Quality as a Health IT subject matter expert. Before joining FORP in 2013, prior to working at HRSA, Natasha was a health insurance specialist at the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. Natasha received her Bachelor's of Science degree in Healthcare Management from Towson University and a Master's of Science degree in Healthcare Administration Informatics from the University of Maryland. Natasha is a member of the Student Mentor for the Health Information Management Systems Society and currently serves as a Vice Co-Chair for the HIMSS Federal Health Community. I will turn it over to Natasha, and following Natasha's presentation, we'll hear from Jay Ostrowski, and I'll share his bio once we get to his presentation. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Kelly. And I hate to ask a question. Can you all hear me?
We can hear you.
Oh, okay, perfect. Thank you so much. So I'm going to go ahead and advance my slides. So as Kelly mentioned, I work in the Federal Office of Rural Health Policy Office for the Advancement of Telehealth. And I think we have a poll question up. So the question is, what are the biggest barriers to telehealth implementation? As I understand, many of you are already doing telehealth, which is really great. But we always want to know from the federal perspective, what your barriers are and what they are across the country. So as HRSA grantees for the Maternal Child Health Care grants, it appears that broadband is actually one of your largest barriers compared to the federally qualified health center program. That's actually, that contrasts what they say are barriers. Their largest barriers are actually funding, policy, and also licensure. So interesting to see stigma has a little bit of barriers for telehealth implementation, workforce and staff. So looking from this poll, it looks like still broadband a big issue. And apologies, I don't believe I have a slide regarding broadband specifically, but the telehealth resources are here to answer your broadband needs and questions. So I think we can go ahead and move on from the poll. Thank you so much for responding to that. Great. So I just wanted to give an overview, and I'm pretty sure you all have seen this slide before, but just of where our office is located. So I know your grant comes out of the middle part here where it has maternal and child health programs, which is really great. Our office is actually here where you see the little farmhouse for rural communities. So the office that I work in, the Federal Office of Rural Health Policy Office for the Advancement of Telehealth, provides funding and programs to folks primarily in rural communities. And so back about a couple years ago, we had a telehealth work group across HRSA. It still actually lives and breathes today. And from that work group, we actually found that over 1,300 HRSA awards include a telehealth component across all 50 states, and 8 federal districts, territories have awards with a telehealth component. And so the telehealth activities include things like supporting distance learning, workforce development, telehealth delivery, infrastructure development, and research. And as we are in the world of COVID-19 currently with this emergency declaration, all of these things are very timely for telehealth. We have definitely seen a spike in telehealth technical assistance requests, and really glad to be here to be able to share with you these resources from the telehealth resource centers if you don't already know about them. So just a quick definition of telehealth as we define it here at HHS. It's the use of electronic information and telecommunications technology to support distance healthcare, patient and professional-related health education, public health and health administration. And so technologies include, of course, internet, which you all have, but seem to be having issues with broadband, video conferencing, store and forward imaging, which is used a lot for radiology, for example, streaming media, and then terrestrial and wireless communications. So barriers to advancing telehealth. So actually, among the rural communities, broadband is one of the largest barriers. So in a report written by the FCC, 53% of rural Americans lack access to benchmarks broadband connectivity, which is 25 megabits upload, 3 megabits download. So, you know, it's very interesting to see that you all are having those issues, and certainly the TRCs are here to help you with finding resources for that. Licensure, so many states require out-of-state clinicians providing telehealth services, and in the era of COVID that we're living in right now, some of these licensure restrictions have been lifted and are relaxed. Payment as well, reimbursement for telehealth by Medicaid and private insurers varies greatly, and so our telehealth resource centers actually provide information about the 50-state telehealth policies and reimbursement. So I'm really excited to share with you some of these resources today if you don't already know about them. One thing I wanted to share about our Office for the Advancement of Telehealth was our programs for FY 2019 through FY 2020. This chart actually changes and has changed a lot since COVID-19. We've gotten a spike in funding. So this was actually the information as of a couple of days ago, but it has changed since then. But I did want to share that the programs here are still the same. So our Telehealth Network Grant Program is one of our largest programs. I believe Carlos Mena is on the line, who is the project officer for that and program coordinator for that program. Right now, that program is actually under competition for emergency services. So you can check out grants.gov and see that there is a funding opportunity open for that. I believe that the deadline is June 15th for the new funding. Then we have our Substance Abuse Treatment Network Grant Program. We have 3 grantees for that. We have some great evaluation and data from that program. And then we have our evidence-based telebehavioral health network program. this program is ongoing, and we have 14 awardees that focus on telebehavioral health. They also have a great evidence-based research based off of that program. And then the telehealth resource centers, which I'll mention a little bit later. We have 14 telehealth resource centers for that. And then we have our 2 telehealth centers of excellence, one located in Mississippi, University of Mississippi, the other one located in the Medical University of South Carolina. So they provide not technical assistance, but more of research for telehealth, and so they have a lot of information on the evidence base on the use of telehealth. We also have our telehealth-focused Rural Health Research Center, which is located out of our University of Iowa. And then we also manage our licensure portability programs, such as our Federation for State Medical Boards. So just to give you an overview of the telehealth resource centers, if you don't already know about them, so there are 14 telehealth resource centers, 2 are national, 12 are regional. So the 2 national, the first one focuses on policy, which is our Center for Connected Health Policy located out of Sacramento, California. Then we have our Center for Technology, which is located out of Alaska, and they provide advice and guidance for telehealth technologies. And so those 2 national organizations are true experts in the field. Folks have probably heard of Center for Connected Health Policy and didn't realize that they're actually funded by HRSA. And so they have wonderful free of charge resources on their website. So if you Google Center for Connected Health Policy, you could find even the latest policies on COVID-19 and other telehealth policies specific to your states. Then we have the regional TRCs. So if you go on the website, you'll be able to find information in their interactive map of which TRC serves your state. So if you go online, click on a state, your state, you can find out which TRC that you could reach out to regarding policy questions, any technical assistance questions, how do I implement telehealth, how do I find broadband. They are all well-versed in how to help you find all of that information free of charge because they are grant funded. And so just so you know, for COVID-19, the TRCs were actually found as a valuable resource and were supported by the CARES Act for advancing telehealth, and so they actually received an additional $11.6 million of funding for COVID-19 response and advancing telehealth. So actually in the month of March, they received a spike in telehealth requests of 750% increase. So they're very busy, but they're very happy to help folks that have telehealth questions. So just some of the services that the TRCs provide are technical assistance, individual consultation, training, support for healthcare providers and workforce. They disseminate research findings. They have a heavy online web presence. They have monthly webinars, actually every 3rd Thursday at 2 p.m. They have a monthly webinar dedicated to a topic that is relevant to the current state of telehealth. They have several presentations and conferences for rural and underserved stakeholders across the country. They have effective collaboration amongst themselves. They conduct organizational telehealth assessments. They implement special projects and provide guidance for selecting technologies, platforms, and purchasing options. Again, they assess available wireless and broadband strengths so they can, help you through that. And each TRC understands telehealth regulations, reimbursement models, and parity laws in their states. So if you reach out to one TRC and they don't have the answer, they'll reach out to another TRC who has the answer, and they usually respond within 24 hours. So just a very great resource for HRSA grantees. So just in 2019, our year in review, just to show kind of how the TRCs are doing as far as technical assistance requests. So for website hits, they actually doubled the number. So last year in 2018, they had about 1 million website hits. 2019, 2 million website hits. With COVID-19, I don't know, they probably have a gajillion website hits now, but just showing the that the TRCs have a heavy web presence. They had 4,000 TA inquiries in 2019, and they also provide these what's called the Telehealth Technology Showcases. So if you have a conference, the National TRC for Technology can actually come and bring telehealth devices and peripherals to your conference and show folks in the audience how to use even remote patient monitoring applications, how to use the peripheral devices, how to select peripheral devices, so they're able to do that. I'm not sure if it's free of charge that they do the showcases, but I'm pretty sure they work well with our HRSA grantees. They also have, of course, their presentations and education training sessions, and the regional conferences. I have a slide coming up that'll show kind of what they're doing as far as regional conferences. Again, their webinar attendees are also very popular. So here are some of the resources on their website. They have fact sheets that are very easy to download and print. And if you are looking for information, say for your practice, I always recommend that folks print out their nice, pretty fact sheets and post them up, as far to help with technical assistance for staff within your practice. These are the telehealth policy resources that I was discussing earlier. So the TRC Center for Connected Health Policy has the state laws and reimbursement for all 50 states document, which is also a live document on their website. They also have billing, introduction to fee-for-service guide on billing for telehealth as well. I think this is it's a new resource that was just launched. The TTAC has the telehealth technology toolkits on their website, so you're able to look on there and see, kind of like in a CNET fashion, the differences in the different types of telehealth technologies that are available. Again, these are the showcases I was mentioning. Actually, a couple years ago, they came to HRSA and did a telehealth technology showcase during National Rural Health Week, and they also came for another event, but it was really fun, and we were able to get HRSA's administrator down to see all the fun peripherals and gadgets and things like that for telehealth. So they're able to do that for you if you can reach out to the Telehealth Technology Assessment Center for that. Another thing, so the TRCs are really the true experts in the field. So I did a site visit down to Arkansas last year, and I found out that they do these telehealth talk podcast series. So one of the TRCs are actually radio personalities, and they do these podcast series for telehealth, and so just very, very relevant and interesting talks about telehealth. Regional conferences, so this is for 2020. Obviously, all of these conferences have been now made virtual. So there will not be any in-person conferences, but wanted to just show you kind of the impact that the TRCs have as far as regional conferences. So in the first part of 2020, at least half of the TRCs had a regional conference. And so if you're interested in attending a regional conference virtually or in the future in person, feel free to go to their website, telehealthresourcecenters.org. Then wanted to share some of the telehealth TRC and COVID resources. So the TRCs have been very busy. They actually dedicated a website for telehealth and COVID-19. They also created a telehealth and COVID toolkit, and also have updated guidance on coverage policies for telehealth reimbursement. So if you click on these links, I think that you have them available to you. You can access these resources, or just simply Google them, and you'll be able to find them. But all very relevant, and as we know, a lot of these policies change daily for COVID-19, so the TRCs do a very good job of staying up to date with all the coverage policies and other resources. So if folks have questions, please feel free to reach out to me. Again, my name is Natasha Manzanero, and here's my email address and phone number. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Natasha, so much for sharing those resources. And as Natasha mentioned, they will be embedded into the PowerPoint presentation that you guys will have available to you. So we're going to pause here before we move on to Jay's presentation for a moment, just to address some questions directed towards Natasha. So if you have questions, please enter them into the chat box. So we have a question from Joe Pritchett. Does TTAC and or resource centers provide technical assistance for development of PMHCA awardee websites? If so, who should we contact?
If they help with website development? Is that the question?
Yes.
They can provide guidance for websites. I don't necessarily think they provide technical assistance for creating websites, but if you need guidance for what you're putting on your website as far as telehealth, I would reach out to the TRC in your region. So I'm not sure where you're located, but feel free to reach out to the TRC that is located in your state by going on the interactive map on the website.
Okay, thank you. So our next question is from Tom Schultz. Would the emerging 5G technology address some of the rural broadband issues? And if so, are the TRCs advocating for the development of this technology at the state and federal level?
So the TRCs, just like all HRSA grantees, are prohibited from lobbying and advocating for policy, but the TRCs provide education and technical assistance for things like broadband. So as far as the advocating part, TRCs don't do that, but they certainly provide education for it.
Okay. And we just got a comment from Susan Griffin in Alabama, saying that they appreciate Lloyd Sermons with the Southeast TRC, and that he's been a great resource.
Oh, great. Yeah, Lloyd is hilarious, so. Mm-hmm.
Great. So I don't see any immediate questions, but if you continue to have questions, feel free to drop them into the chat box. I am going to introduce our next speaker. We'll be hearing from Jay Ostrowski, who serves as a consultative partner with the Mid-Atlantic Telehealth Resource Center. Jay is the CEO of the Behavioral Health Innovation and Adaptive Telehealth. Jay's passion is research and development in the telemedicine field. Thus far, Jay has created 9 peer-reviewed telemental health training courses, created the broad certification in telehealth, led the development of 12 HIPAA secure telemedicine platforms, and created the Telebehavioral Health Center of Excellence. He still practices a little online as a licensed professional counselor. I'll turn it over to you, Jay.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Great. So that's a quick telehealth lesson right there. So you always want to make sure that someone can hear you, especially if you're presenting and you go on for minutes and minutes and minutes and then no one heard you. Kind of a waste of time in people's life, right? So I'm Jay Ostrowski, and I work with the Mid-Atlantic Telehealth Resource Center as one of my roles. We're kind of drilling down. Natasha took a higher level, national level, and I'm kind of drilling down more into specific telebehavioral health issues. So I wanted to go over some of that with you. I want to give you a couple reminders if you're currently in practice. These talks are really interesting because we don't know how much experience people have, and even if you've been around for a while doing this, I'm hoping to give you some new ideas and ways to apply what you're doing. I think it's good if you've been around also, things change quickly. Like we never thought a month or two ago that most of the world would do telehealth, right, at least in the U.S. And here we are just really busting at the seams with telehealth. A lot of the norms that people said we can't do that, suddenly, miraculously, we are doing that. Now the big question is, are we doing it safely, effectively, efficiently, right? So I think a lot of us are going to be going into this new paradigm and reorienting where we're thinking wow, this may not go away as fast as we thought it would. We were told, that there's going to be this wave when we get through it. Well, it seems like maybe there are multiple waves, and some of the water may never go away. So we need to rethink how we're going about delivering care. And I think it's reasonable to say that telehealth will be a part of most people's practices indefinitely to some degree. And also that more exposure to this, if it's good exposure, meaning they have a good experience, both patients and providers, it's likely they're going to be requesting this more and more in the future. So I'll go ahead and advance my slides and tell you more about it. So if you're new to this, you need to understand that there's a couple ideas that people think, well, this is kind of easy. I'm going to make my spreadsheet. I'm going to make my deliverables list. I'm going to kind of knock this out chip by chip and get through this. And your boss might be one of those people that thinks this is a linear path to get there. In reality, it's a little bit of a back and forth, fog of war situation sometimes where you have to experiment with some things to find out what will work for your use case and not. Now we start these with some understanding of what's normal, but what we've learned in telehealth over now 70 plus years of doing this work is that no two telehealth systems are really the same. There will be some close colleagues, so you can maybe model after what somebody else does, but then there's going to be little tweaks that make this unique to your practice. And you may find, in fact, some places where you have a new avenue for providing care maybe more efficiently or effectively than somebody else. So if you've been around for a while, I hope you'll pay attention to this and think maybe in some new ways about how you provide care. Maybe consider even adding a layer of care to what you normally do now. So when I go through this, I'm going to give you some options and to just review some different places where there are opportunities. Then I'm going to go just a quick view of some requirements, and then I'm going to give you, the last half of my slides are going to be about technical assistance resources where you can get more for this. So the first thing I want to tell you, and I hope just echoes through your soul, is that you can do this. If you're new or you're feeling overwhelmed, some people are thrown into these situations with no background and going, I don't know what I'm doing, and it's normal to be a little bit disoriented and a little scared. So we want to tell you that we're here for you. This is what we do all day long. There's really no problem that hasn't been addressed in telehealth so far. There are new little combinations that come up, but there are many, many resources and good experts that can connect you. So the telehealth resource centers are really those local guides, your local Sherpa, that can either lead you to resources online, or they can lead you to people that have been in there, done that, or they can give you, here are the principles that to apply and the things to think about and worry about and not worry about, and help you get these layers. And I just put some examples of little ideas where I work in development of new services and tech, so we're always helping people find new opportunities. So you may right now do medication assisted therapy, MAT. You might think about doing tele-MAT now in this space, or maybe case management, all the in-person services, and maybe your self-help materials, maybe you move those online to maybe a HIPAA secure environment where people can access those and help themselves more. And also, patient group chat. There are different HIPAA secure chat systems that you can turn on and integrate with your workflows, where the patients help themselves to some degree. And there are some safety concerns there, but also some safety protocols that can be put in place to make that an acceptable practice. Of course, these don't replace in-person services or the need for a professional, but if you think of it as a layer of care or ancillary care that more well rounds our services, I think it's more of a population treatment mindset, where we're thinking about just not an encounter to encounter, but how do we holistically help our patients in more of a continuum of care instead of just a one and done. So obviously telepsychiatry and counseling, these are all things that could be woven together in different combinations. And so just wanted to seed a couple ideas and again tell you about some other options. So there are many types of telehealth settings. The clinic-to-clinic model is obviously where you have a patient arrive at one clinic and then they're getting services to another clinic where the provider is. Much of that has been kind of sidelined by COVID-19, and a lot of people that had that that clinic-to-clinic model are now doing clinic-to-home, which is that's the fourth model, which is you might have a clinician at their home because they can't go into their clinic. Now they're seeing a client at their home. And those are acceptable practices. They do require some additional security configurations to make that a safe encounter. But then you have, obviously a clinic-to-client home, and we call it clinic-to-X, where we have, my slide's a little messed up there in translation, but where we are doing lots of in-home care, client care in different settings like a school or a prison or some other, maybe a nonprofit, where they have people showing up for services, and then they add a layer of healthcare through telehealth through that. So there are many opportunities if you're not into different arenas like that. You don't have to have them come to your clinic, and you really don't have to have expensive equipment to get this done. There are also many types of services. So of course the in-home services we've been talking about, we can have that kind of consultation where you need a specialist to weigh in on something, or maybe case management, but there's also remote patient monitoring and chronic care management that I would pull your attention to, because those are additional billable services that can really help you maintain and manage a client from a distance. And maybe you didn't have that idea of managing the client's vital signs over time, but that is a billable service that many people can add, and it's actually not as widespread as it really could or should be. And this is usually appropriate and billable if there are two chronic care conditions. And of course, if you have a complicated case where there's a pregnancy involved and you need to monitor them, before or after pregnancy, remote patient monitoring is an excellent way of doing that. And again, at the Telehealth Resource Centers, we can guide you on how do you get that started, and how do you evaluate device companies. And as soon as you start talking to a device company or a software company, they're going to sell you something, right, or try to. So you really need to have kind of your requirements and your workflows kind of thought through first. And then you go shopping for those companies that meet that criteria. But these are, again, just some ideas that you can think through of what way could I add a layer of care to my current system. Perhaps you want to have a more secure messaging in between sessions, or you want them to join maybe a cohort or a topical group, maybe a topical library where they're accessing these things. All of those would need still to be done in a HIPAA secure environment. However, there are softwares out there that do this work. They don't have to be expensive, but they're available for you to integrate and get the appropriate alerts and workflows to make sure that you're doing that in a secure and safe manner. On a side note, I just want to mention that we're talking about security a little bit, and that I want to mention HIPAA compliance in just a moment in the COVID environment. There are also different types of technologies you can engage with people. Now, when you go down this road, you want to make sure that what you're doing is as integrated together as you can, because you don't want to have like 3 or 4. I've met companies that are trying to put together a system with 4 different technologies, and that could be kind of crazy making. But a lot of these can be integrated together. We're talking about the video conferencing. Think about how do you send a link to somebody to do that video? How do you get them to sign up consent remotely online? They need that consent, right, for this service. How do you get scheduling done, schedule changes without a lot of phone call labor involved? There are, again, softwares out there that do this, and workflows available that are actually very fluid and efficient. And again, these things don't need to be expensive. So I think it's real important to think this through as, from a logistics standpoint. I know a lot of people are doing kind of their emergency procedures for how do we do this because we suddenly can't see people in person, or they won't come in. And I've actually heard some recent reports of hospitals laying off physicians and nurses and their staff because they had a drop-off in people wanting to come in to get services because they're concerned of getting the virus, and rightly so, right? Because people with the virus are going to that same place. However, I want to introduce the idea that maybe it's time to take a step back and breathe a little bit. Think about your workflows in the COVID era, and think about that. Maybe that water never goes away completely, and we got to continue to do this long term, and make a new plan. And that's, I think, a good conversation to have with the telehealth resource centers. Again, they're no cost to you for that consultation, and they're able to help you kind of talk through your workflows and look for what are the ways I can be more efficient and more effective and more safe. In the short term, the Office for Civil Rights has stated that they're not going to be enforcing some of the HIPAA regulations because they want people to get help and quickly. However, the law didn't go away. They're just saying they're not going to enforce it temporarily to get us through this hump. In the language, though, online, they still mention and affirm several times that they're expecting us to abide by the HIPAA guidelines because they're meant for safety. So I think it's important to think this through, like this is not a free pass to let you use whatever you want or do it whatever way you want. We don't want to be called out for being negligent. If you've had access to and there's general awareness of these ways to do this work securely, I think you're going to find that people are expecting that from you. And certainly your patients are not going to want their private health information out on the internet somewhere, especially mental health, behavioral health patients, right? So I just want to make a pitch for rethinking all this in a new way after, when you get out of emergency mode, just take a step back and make kind of a new plan. What's your long-term vision of how to care for people more on an indefinite basis through technology? And on that line, I would say that there are many different technologies that have a wide variety of performance issues. So some perform great, some not so much. Broadband was an issue brought up a couple times, and I think that's a very important issue. However, I will say that things are changing rapidly in the technology world, where people are able to do video calls at very low bandwidth. So I still practice telemental health myself, and I've been able to see patients at 350 KB, which is like half a megabyte upload and download. That's not your high definition granular view that you would need for like a dermatology visit, but it is enough for me to see a fluid person there and not getting stuck, and I can see their emotions and the way they carry themselves, and I can hear their voice very clearly. So I think the technology is getting better and better for us to be able to do this work remotely, even in a low bandwidth area. So I just want to encourage you to explore those different platforms and shop around. If you're not happy with the one that you have, I would recommend trying 2 or 3 more, get some demonstrations and try them out. You usually want to have like a pilot team of people doing that for you. So it's not, you're not rocking the big boat. You want to have a little speedboat on the side, practicing and vetting these things before you roll that out. But look at what's on the market and see what people have to offer. Again, technology is changing very rapidly. So every 2 or 3 months, there are new capabilities that are coming out on the market, actually faster than that. But in general, that's where I see kind of these spurts of changes growing. And a lot of these are taking on multiple layers of functionalities that were not possible in the past, or the prices are coming down to a really affordable level. So I just encourage you to look at that. And I'm going to have a resource here where you can do a little bit more research as well. So when you are thinking about software, think about what are your workflows. I'm going to go actually to another slide to talk about that a little bit more. So when you're doing this work, you're basically creating an online office, right? So it is possible now, and it has been possible for a few years actually, to have an entire office 100%, all your signatures, your parental consents, your labs, a lot of these things done, all these things online. They don't draw blood online, of course, but that can be done at a local clinic and sent to a lab, but you can get the lab results. You can get everything done online. So I have a number of people I work with where one clinic, they've been doing this services for 9 years, and the psychiatrist had never met a patient in person over 9 years. So I thought it was pretty cool. So for your perspective, you might have to rethink about how you do things, but I guess I want to open up the possibility that many of these things can be done online. You just might need a little bit more pointers on where those options are and if they fit your return on investment for your grant funding or whatever other business model you're using. I will say that it's more and more feasible and affordable to do this. Right now there are, I think it's 11 states that allow you to provide services in another state, and if you have a valid license. In a different state, they're allowing you to see patients in their state. And that's places like, I think it's Texas. Well, Texas is the one that comes to mind. But there are 11 of them, so I don't want to say the wrong state on a call here because that would be not good. So just consider what workflows do you dream about, and go ask your telehealth resource center or do a little bit of Googling to see who does that kind of work. Or again, I'll have some more resources here for you. You also might want to think about how you're going to do document sharing and reporting. Also supervision. If you're a psychiatrist and you also have residents that work with you, or maybe you are supervising clinical social workers or psychologists, maybe peer specialists, you need to think about how you do this in a HIPAA secure way. And again, there are ways to do that where you can do all your meetings basically online. You can have people review documents, sign off on documents 100% online in a HIPAA secure environment. So think about a little more broadly about the workflows that you wish that your patients had or your staff had, because I think there are more and more, you'll find there are technologies that are available where you can switch out and get more efficiency, maybe even lower cost, and allow your staff to do more higher level things. You also might be interested in making an app. I would say if you are doing an app, this is where you will need a specialist. This is not something that you want to have your friend or your daughter-in-law do because they know WordPress. It does have a number of security issues that you're going to need to look at and integrate with. There are some softwares out there that are usable for making health secure apps, but it does have quite a few more risks than just your normal software. So you want to make sure that that's done by a professional and not just taking it off the shelf thing. But also there's a lot of kind of maintenance issues and security issues. So again, it's something that can be done. This is one of the ones that I help make, so I am confident that it can be done, but it does need some thoughtfulness. And but with an app, you can do a lot of great things where you're really more in contact with a patient more real time. For their mental health, you can do prescription reminders. You can do MAT reminders for them. You can get them to show up to their appointments. You can connect people in more like a Facebook type group that's HIPAA secure. You can give them more reminders and set goals and remind them of their goals. There are lots of little innovative things you can do if you have a secure app. So I would have you be creative and think about what you'd like to do to stretch those boundaries a little bit. I want to remind everybody of some of the high-level best practices here. This is a list of 16 that I helped create when we made the board certification for telemental health. This is multidisciplinary. So this is the kind of the high-level list that covers like 98% of all the laws out there on telemental health. So I track all the laws in all the states for 8 professions for telehealth, which is a bit nutty, but that's what I do in my free time. And some of these are pretty, they seem pretty basic, but they are boxes that you need to check off. For instance, you really need your providers to have training, and that's typically required by law in your state. And I would say it's absolutely required by the ethics boards of whatever profession that you have. I've reviewed all of the ethics regulations or the ethics policies, and they all have something about getting training for providing your services. It's important because you'll have providers go, oh, this is easy, I FaceTime with my kids or whatever, but doing this service, you're going to want to have them do a little simulation with you and with others and help them create some self-awareness of how they look. I joke about like Dr. Forehead, or they may have their video, pointing to something kind of weird instead of themselves. For mental health patients, this is quite disturbing because they really need a human connection. They need to see eyeballs of the provider and not the provider looking away at something else. So a lot of times it's necessary for the provider to get some awareness of technical etiquette and what can go wrong and how to prevent what can go wrong, and how to make sure that they're comfortable with the technology and using it. And the leading indicator of a successful visit is the provider being comfortable with the technology. So you want to have them do some practicing and get some coaching from, through some training or through their colleagues here. Also, you want to think about find out what are the association ethics in your profession, and then your licensure board, of course. So every state and every profession, it's possible to have a different set of regulations. That's every state and every profession in every state. So there are, I think, 12 states that have a composite board where they'll have like psychiatry and nursing are one board, and then the other mental health professions are in one board. We love those, but there are only 12 of them. The rest of the states often have multiple licensure boards with multiple different regulations. So say, for instance, social work is not the same in two different states. It's going to be different in every state. And you might have one state, maybe Kansas has a different requirement for social work, counseling, psychiatry, nursing, peer support, addictions, marriage and family therapy. So it is complex, and it's worth doing a little digging, asking the telehealth resource centers, or I'm going to give you some resources here in a moment that will give you some places to go look for some more. But you need to be mindful that they are different, and you need to make kind of your chart of requirements and make sure that you're knocking those out. What I've done here on the screen is kind of list some, and I covered up a section where I talk about implementation, not to aggravate you, but to just to be mindful and help you understand that how you implement these things, and what needs to be implemented and how it's implemented is going to be specific for your state. It's going to be specific for your profession, the population you serve, the software you use, and the policies and workflows of your own company. So this is what makes it difficult to have a template for everyone because there is so many different types of healthcare and types of way we can help people. So it's not, again, to make your mind kind of go numb, but if you do contact your telehealth resource center and you say, here's what I want to accomplish, and here's who my providers are, here's the work that we're trying to get done, here's how we propose to go through it, you can have someone basically audit that for you and give you advice on, you can skip those 3 steps by doing this way, or that can be handled more efficiently this other way, or hey, don't forget this other thing that is normal in your state. So I just want to, again, offer this resource to you guys. And maybe you're at a point where you've been doing this for a long time and you've forgotten that, oh yeah, we need to do that. So it might be time to brush up. Or maybe you've been doing it really well for a while, but you're like, I want to add this other layer, and you just want to, brush up on what's required to make sure that you're doing this safely and securely. So again, we have many resources for you online, but I want to give you that high level of some of what these requirements are. There's also another angle to this. We work a lot on what are the legal, what are the technical, what are the reimbursement requirements, what's sustainable, but there's often something missing here. There's 3 things actually. One is, what's the patient's experience? And so when you're setting up your program, and even if you've done your program for a while, it's good every once in a while to stop and be a secret shopper for your own program. What is it like for someone to contact us for us the first time, or to sign up for an appointment, or to reschedule, or to fill out our paperwork, because things change over time, and little things can add up to being kind of clunky or aggravating, and you may not know it if you're on the other side of things. In addition, you want to look at what's the provider's experience, because if the provider's unhappy or the patient's unhappy, this is going to break down, and all your hard work for getting people to do this online will go by the wayside if there's a little hang-up that makes this really annoying. Often you can change little things to make it more fluid and more interesting, more give them peace of mind. So that's where I think, again, telehealth resource centers can give you a little overview and look over what you're doing and give you some good practical advice on how to beef up what you have. But in this slide, you'll notice there's one more thing missing, and that's your manager or your admin. Now, on this call, I'm pretty sure a lot of these people are managers and administrators, but this is often missing from that experience. As we're thinking about workflows, we're thinking about maybe security, but we need to be considering how we're going to measure this stuff, and can the technology do this automatically for it, or I call it automagically for us. So how can we get a lot of this automated data so that we can make sure that our reporting is a lot easier? So that's one way to look at this, is look at the end result, work backwards and go, okay, at the end of this, we have to turn into HRSA this paperwork. So this is the data that we want out of our systems. Are we putting it into our systems, and where? And could that be collected in different places automatically and in a fluid way where we're not having to have any workflow holes where it's manual labor? We want to automate as much as we can and focus more on patient care. Also, you want to think about how will I analyze this data, and what format will I get it? Is it usable? A lot of times you'll get a report that's like a PDF, and that's not real helpful if you need an Excel spreadsheet to do data sorting and analyzing. So think about what's the data structure of what you're going to get back, and then will that be valid data, or that be kind of mixed with too many different things? I'll give you a little for instance, and it seems trivial, but some softwares out there will ask for, will have you put in a patient name. Well, that sounds good, but what you really need is a data box for patient first name, patient middle name, patient last name, and then the little acronym on the end, the surname, or their like junior or senior or the third. And then you want to be able to sort by those fields. You also might, like address, might all be in one field where it needs to be broken down into different fields. So as you're looking for your system shopping, those are kind of things that I think a telehealth resource center can give you advice on to think about the data in new ways, and then have that as your criteria before you go shopping to make sure that you can get what you need out of your software vendors. But as again, kind of going back to you as a manager, you as an admin are one of the user experiences that you need to be thinking about. As you're thinking about the patient, you're thinking about provider, what's going to be your experience? Because if this is too much work for you, you're not going to have the outcomes that you want or be able to collect what you want over time. So just include yourself in that and make sure you're taking care of yourself. So technical assistance, this is the reason you came here, right? There are multiple services out there. I work with the Mid-Atlantic Telehealth Resource Center. It's one of the 14. We cover the East Coast. I wanted to make you aware, if you go to matrc.org, that bluish aqua turquoise, I guess, button, we have on our homepage a button for COVID-19. And what we've done is we've collected a lot of resources. And so each one of these sections are drop-down menus with a lot more and a lot more and a lot more. The problem that you're going to find when you're looking for information is that there's too much information. And that might seem like a revelation for some people, like, I'm brand new to this, I didn't realize there was so much out there already. There are quite literally thousands and thousands of peer-reviewed journal articles. So the research is there. There are thousands of pages of help sites out there. The difficulty with the help sites that you'll find, and not to throw cold water on people, the difficulty is that they are not always updated regularly. So what we've done with these telehealth resource center sites, and with this page in particular that I help keep up, is we're trying to put the best information and the most current information right up there, and then we're removing the old information so that you're not getting or using old information. Because if you get something from a year ago or 2 years ago, is absolutely going to be old, because so many things have changed in the last, not just the last month, but over the last year as well. And we're expecting that they will change over the next month, 3 months, 6 months, as the whole culture and legislation is responding and policies are responding to this new reality. We're expecting that you'll get a lot more new changes coming. So we want to give you one place to go where you can find a lot of answers quickly. And then, of course, you can contact us if you don't get the answer you need. We're also looking for feedback on making sure that we're providing the information that's needed out there. So if you can't find what you need, there's a contact us button to get technical assistance. And we're always happy to answer those. And again, we've had a spike in those, but we are very personal in our approach to serving people, so we want you to know that and feel helped. One of those drop-down menus on the COVID page has a video that I made a few weeks ago. If you need a refresher, it's just, I think it's 40 minutes, giving you the knowledge base of here's what's typical, what's needed to do these visits, and I go through a quick walkthrough of all those and a lot of different issues that I think you need to keep in mind. So there's that video is there. We have another one for telehealth in general. That's another one of those COVID drop-down menus. We also have quite a lot in terms of the telepsychiatry toolkits and child and adolescent psychiatry toolkits. There are lots of different things in here. The difficulty, of course, is we don't know who you are coming to the site, so if you have difficulty finding what you need, just reach out to us on the technical assistance form. We'll be happy to steer you to the right place, and we do answer things pretty quickly, usually within 24 hours. Another section to look at if you're an FQHC, a federally qualified health center, we have a section just for you, and you guys have been asking for this for a while, so we put this all in one place where you have 4 or 5 links, and as we get new information, we'll be updating this so you can quickly find what you need. And again, please feel free to ask us for any other questions. If you go back, kind of dialing back to our homepage, matrc.org, we have a section of pages that are the Telebehavioral Health Center of Excellence. I help produce this page, and it's something we keep adding to and updating regularly. So you'll find some videos there on kind of what is telebehavioral health and what is HIPAA compliance relevant to telebehavioral health, and what does this look like in terms of reimbursement or clinic-to-clinic work, direct-to-consumer work. So these are good videos if you're brand new to this or you need a quick refresher. These are 30 seconds to 1 minute long. So this is the kind of stuff that you want to send a link to your boss to say this is what's included, or people that are really not knowledgeable of telehealth. Here's what will help you kind of quickly get your head around what this is, because as many of you know, digging into telehealth, it feels like too many requirements, and so it's easy for your mind to go numb. We try to boil it down into the essentials here, and in a couple other places. So another one of these resources for you, is that you can, on that same page that I was just on, if you scroll down, you can search by topic. We have a lot of information broken down into pages about clinical guidelines, crossing state lines, HIPAA security, what are the laws and regulations for the states. We have a financial page that will show you the top 3 telehealth payers in each of the states. So we collected data. We directly contacted all these major health insurance agencies and said, do you cover telehealth? Of course, this was before a month ago, so a lot of that's changed and gotten even better. But you can quickly find information here. Also, finding technology. We have a couple different pages on that, depending on how deep or how much information you want. There's also some training, and then a page dedicated just to tele-MAT. We also have a financial information page to help you, learn some of the ins and outs of technology reimbursement, and there's also one on the policy page that Natasha mentioned earlier. Every other Friday, I am online for a couple hours just answering questions. So if you have questions today that we don't answer, I will be online tomorrow. You can go to MATRC, the aqua button here, matrc.org, and scroll down and you'll see a click here to join button, and that will open up a video for you, and you can join by video or by phone and just bring your questions to answer. So we're there about 2 hours every time. And if you have any questions, but it's every other Friday. So if you prefer to have a live conversation and have difficulty scheduling, we're here for you. If you want to just send us questions on the technical assistance page, you're also welcome to do that. Of course, you can see there's an email update list if you want to be added to that. We don't spam people. We just send kind of quarterly updates or something really urgent that you would need to know about. So one last resource I want to share with you is the Telemental Health Comparison site, Telemental Health Comparisons. What you would do on this page, it's a vendor-neutral page where we have the vendors tell us what criteria they meet, and you're able to shop by criteria. So let's say you want video, and you want chat, and you want a certain level of HIPAA security. You can click all the things that you want, and it will narrow your search down to these vendors. Again, we're not promoting one vendor over another. The vendors give us their own information, but we want you to get your head around like how many are out there and what your options are. So some of this you maybe didn't know was possible with software, but through the site you'll be able to find quickly that, hey, oh, these are available, and here's some vendors that provide that. We do update this fairly regularly. There are always new ones coming out, so it might be, sometimes we miss things along the way, and always happy to add more and more, but it's a good place to shop. So I wanted to provide that resource to you. Again, I'm here for you, just a click away, me and 14 other telehealth resource centers. If you have questions, we're always happy to help.
Strategies for ability. We'll be hearing from Dr. Marion Earls. We'll discuss the connection between the American Academy of Pediatrics and the PMHCA program. We'll have a sort of working lunch or a chat and chew as our division director, Lauren Ramos, who you heard from earlier, will moderate a lessons learned panel with your fellow PMHCA awardees. And finally, we'll end with a quick Q&A and some talk time with your grants management specialist and project officer. So we hope to, while we're disappointed we weren't able to see you all in person and meet some of you in person, we're happy that you all were able to join us virtually. Thank you so much for your flexibility. So with that, we can go ahead and end for the day. If any questions come up between now and tomorrow, feel free to reach out to your PMHCA project officer, and we look forward to speaking with you all tomorrow. Have a great one.